Okay, Chair, we're live.
Welcome everyone to today's meeting of the Learning and Skills Scrutiny Committee. We've got 3 items of business on the agenda today. The post-consultation review of the proposed WESP and 2 papers, one from Estin and one internally, looking at the authority's response to COVID in respect to the education service. We're going to be spending the bulk of our time on the WESP today, as that is the more substantive document. But before we move on to that, I'll go through the formal openings of the meeting. Wyn, do you have any apologies for today's meeting?
Yes, Chair, I've got 2 apologies, one from County Councillors Kath Roberts-Jones and also from Tim Van Rees, who's on another council business.
Thanks very much, Wyn. Does anyone else have any other apologies that haven't made it to Wyn so far? No, in which case I move on to the second item of business, which is a declaration of interests in respect to any items on the agenda. By silence, can I take it that none of us have any conflicts of interest that they wish to declare? Thank you. And thirdly, I move on to the declaration of any unauthorised party whips in respect of any business as under the relevant local government measures. Again, by silence, can you confirm that you have not received any party whip? Thank you, everyone. We're now going to move on to the first main item of business, which is the scrutiny review of the post-consultation version of the WESP. This is quite a long document, split into a number of objectives, and as agreed previously, we will look at each objective in turn. I'll invite officers to briefly introduce the changes from the previous draft, and then members can look and ask any questions that they have. But I'll now pass you across to Councillor Phil Davis, the portfolio holder for education, to introduce the officers that we have with us today.
Thank you, Chair. It'll be Marianne Evans who introduces the paper, but she is supported by a number of officers who I'll just ask really to introduce themselves as they come in. I think it's only appropriate. There is a large number of officers on this call, along with the net level Director of Education as well. So I think it's probably best I hand over to Marianne. Thank you. Thank you, Phil. In which case, Marianne, the floor is yours.
Hey, thank you. Diolch yn fawr pawb am y gwahoddiad. I will quickly summarise what we've done since scrutiny last considered the WESP, and I think then we'll move quite quickly into the detail for each of the outcomes. I have a number of officers here. Lynette is here with us, Director of Education. I think Emma is here, and I've got the whole team. So I've got Hayley Smith from ALN, Anwen Orals is here, Delith is here from School Improvement, and Sharon Hughes is also here from early years. Right, so we, as required by legislation, we have consulted on our draft WESP between the 24th of September and the 18th of November, and you'll have in your packs the responses received from a variety of respondents, including a number of organisations, national organisations as well, a few community councils and governing bodies, plus Mudiad Meithrin and RHAG. As you can see, we've the text within the WESP is red. So the red indicates where we've added in additional information as required. The main amendments are around strengthening the introduction section. We needed to link it more clearly with the actual strategy for transforming education, plus the vision document that had been approved by Cabinet. The comments around adding in or making better linkages between things like the Powys Local Development Plan and other key strategies and policies within the council, which we've done. There was a lot of comments about needing a little bit more detail, more meat on the bones, particularly around outcome 1, which is around the early years, And we've added in more detail around those, especially to identify areas of the county where there may be gaps or areas that need improvement. We've added in transition rates for year 6 and year 7 for each school, rather than using just one figure for the whole of the county. And I think that provides a very interesting picture. We've updated the information as well around secondary school developments, as quite a lot has happened since the draft West was under consideration. Okay, so in summary, the main themes of the consultation, as we find it, are general support for the ambition of the West. There is a response there from Estyn, which I think speaks volumes in terms of how they view the council's ambition around this agenda. Again, more detailed information required about some of the key actions, including timescales. And we have been very careful here not to put too much detailed information within the actual West. You must remember it's a 10-year strategy. With each of the outcomes, we will be developing detailed action plans that will be monitored carefully by both our internal governance, plus also the Welsh Medium Education Forum. There was concern about pupil transition rates between Welsh Medium, primary and secondary. Concern about staffing, this has come through quite a lot. Even though it's got its own outcome, it does flow through all the other outcomes as well. Concerned, have we got enough Welsh speaking staff to be able to deliver the aims and objectives of the West? Plus also there was quite a lot of different local issues coming up. For example, the Llanidloes area, there was quite a lot of responses there about opportunities to develop Welsh Medium in the area, plus some concerns. Brecon area, concern about Welsh Medium provision at Brecon High School. Brohylfgen, so the Machynlleth area, and particularly concerns about the impact of the recent decision there to change the language category of the school. And also some concern about the lack of designated Welsh Medium secondary provision in North East Powys. Plus, there was also some concern, or maybe some opposition, to the possible development of Welsh Medium primary in the North Powys, Llanfyllin catchment area, so the border area up there. So next steps are, should Cabinet approve the West tomorrow, it does then go to Welsh Government by the end of this month. There's a period then where Welsh Government will scrutinise every authority's West, and we'll be coming back and forth. It will be a dialogue more than anything else. And then should it be supported, it's implemented, it becomes operational from the 1st of September 2022. Okay, and that's it as my preamble.
Thank you, Marianne. Does anyone have any initial comments on what Marianne has said to us, potentially focusing on the very introductory statements, whether there's any particular concerns that are not going to be addressed elsewhere? Go ahead, Councillor Sandra.
Thank you, Chair. Just regarding, now I've got mixed pages. We've got page 4 and 5, small pages, 15, 16 on the big pages. There are some statistics there, and they, to me, don't add up, because it says about September 2020, 358 numbers of Welsh medium funded early year places, and that equates to 24.4%. And then January 21, it rises to 372, but the percentage goes down to 24.2. I understand that, I don't know how that works out actually. So I'm concerned about the stats. I'm trying to move my arrow from one screen to another. It's a little bit, I'm a bit slow in doing this. But on the next page then, which is small page 4, big page 16, April 21, there's 390 youngsters and 24.4 again. So where are the figures? Where are we with those, please?
Thanks. I don't know who wants to take that, but as that's in objective 1, if they'd like to take the introduction of objective 1 following on from that.
Okay. I'll come back to the figures. I'll have a look at it, Councillor Sandra, but we'll check, and I'll need to respond if I'll need somebody else to have a look at that for me. That's okay?
Okay, thank you.
Do you want me to come in? Sorry, Councillor
Yeah.
Peter, apologies,
Yeah,
apologies, Eirik here.
By all means, Eirik.
I'm not sure whether it is to do with the number of funded places, as in there's a different number of pupils entering at the start of each term in the early years. So I took that to say that the numbers are actually increasing. So the numbers in 2020 were 1,466, of which 358 were there. In January, there were an additional number of pupils that started in earlier settings, and the number in Welsh medium places rose to 372. And then in April, the numbers of early years places were 1,600, because the next group of pupils entered the settings then, of which 390 were Welsh medium pupils. That's how I took those figures.
Eirik, that's in line with what I was going to suggest. It looks like the numbers in Welsh places are not increasing as fast as the number in totally funded places.
That's correct.
Therefore,
yeah.
whilst the raw numbers will go up, the percentages will go down.
Yes, that's my understanding too. But we can check those figures, Councillor Sandra. But that's my understanding of it.
Thank you, especially as it's going to Welsh Government, and both the 3 columns of figures, they've all risen in any way. So it's just to check that the stats are right if they're going elsewhere.
Yeah, I know we would expect those to go up by the April. That would be the largest proportion of pupils in the settings in the April, because that'll be coming into the summer term, which we know our settings would be at their largest. So that is my interpretation of that, but we will make sure that we check those figures and that they are correct.
Thank you.
Thank you for that, Eirik. Do we actually have the figures for September 21 and January 22 that could be added into that, or is it too soon for those?
We would have the figures for September 21, because those would have been the last term. I would have to check the figures for January 22, which is obviously only a few weeks ago. We should have those on as well. What we need to just check is that all those children have taken up their places. But we could definitely put September 21 on there.
If it were possible, adding those just so that we have the most complete set of figures as this is going forward for 10 years.
Certainly, thank you.
Marianne, would you like to introduce objective 1, or whoever is introducing it, and then we'll take more detailed questions on it?
Okay, outcome 1 is actually Eirik and Sharon Hughes, and it's around Welsh. It's around the early years. So the outcome is more nursery children, 3-year-olds, receiving their education through the medium of Welsh. And just to add, whilst all the outcomes are really, really important in the delivery of Welsh medium education and to increase the number of Welsh medium speakers, this is where it all starts. So it's the early years, it's preschool provision that is the cornerstone of this strategy. So Sharon and Eirik are here as well. So.
Do you have any comments, or do you want us to come in?
We hadn't planned on saying anything to begin. We were just happy to accept any questions that anyone does have on outcome 1.
Okay, well, I've got 2 hands shoot up, so I will go with Margaret first. Margaret Everts.
Sorry, yeah, a few quick questions. Just to ask, it isn't down in the document. Flying Start, will that be available in the Welsh medium school in Welshpool when it's up, they move? Because it isn't in the document. It was just a query. Second one, BTEC post-16 childcare learning and development has started in September. Now, it doesn't say and that is in the document. Now, I think it might be helpful if perhaps we could have the numbers of students that we've got or something related to that, because it did start in September, and where it's located or how it's located. You know, is it across the county, or is it in just at the moment one place? The other one, it's important to have such firm foundations in preschool. And it does say the tendering round, the next tendering round will apply for funding for training again, but to improve language skills, which is good for staff. But does that include for staff supply cover, which is a question not related possibly to the document, but it may be a reason if it doesn't, why perhaps some people aren't taking it up, because you have to be able to afford to put in the supply cover if you're a setting, because I don't think they've got spare money available to support the supply cover if someone is training. It was just an observation. Yeah, when is the audit of all early years start to take place? Because it's in there, and I think it's a vital piece of work, and there's no date in there or no time frame for that. That was it, I think. Sorry.
Eric, do you want to take those?
Yeah. Sharon, do you know Flying Start? Sorry, I don't know Flying Start. There are. You do
Yes,
Flying
I
Start.
do. Currently, the Flying Start providers have submitted their tender in the childcare team for the new tender. So that sits within the childcare team. I don't know whether or not the medium set in Ysgol Gymraeg y Trallwng has been successful or not, because that's sitting within another team at the moment. But I am aware that the Kilchmaithrin were planning to submit a tender for Flying Start. So the aim would be in Ysgol Gymraeg y Trallwng that there would be a one-stop
Flying Start, because
for all of the for all early years providers for that provision.
Thank you, Sharon. Eric, the other questions from Margaret.
Yeah, the BTEC, I'm not aware of the figures for the BTEC, so we would have to inquire from others. Anwen, did you know that? Because I know you were involved in setting that up and establishing it. So.
Yes, I do have the answers for that one. So it was offered on the post-16 offer for all our learners in September 2022. No, September 2021, sorry, via Ysgol, but unfortunately none of our pupils actually took it up. So currently we're trying to market and share the information with our current year 11 pupils to see whether we can gain some interest ready for this following September 2022. So we are trying again to gain the interest of our pupils.
Because the document does say it's on offer, but it doesn't. Yes,
it was offered, so it's correct.
Yes.
It was
So
offered,
it is
but
correct.
no child. Yes. It was offered and still will be, but in September, none of our pupils took it up.
But only in one school, or only
no,
where?
We were going to deliver it via Ysgol, which would have meant that any pupil from across Powys could have accessed it.
Yeah.
And that's our intention for September as well.
Right.
Eric, again, for completeness, could we have an amendment in the document recognising that it has been offered, but there was no take up at this point, just so that is on the record as a start point against which to gauge us. I'm probably going to say this quite a few times. I'm keen for us to see as recent a benchmarks in this document as we can, so we can gauge ourselves moving forward. I think there was still a couple more from Margaret.
Yes. In terms of the setting cover, we offer out training, and we do offer that the settings have the supply cover for training as well, alongside that.
Sorry, I wasn't sure it was because I knew that could be a stumbling block. That's good. They get supply.
And that's why we try to offer that out.
That's part of the tendering process or whatever. Yeah.
And the audit of school of staff, I'm not aware of when that is going to take place in terms of the Welsh language skills. I don't know if Sharon, you have an update of when that was starting.
That when we begin more detailed plans for each of the outcomes, it will be included in that. So from September.
Yes, it just seemed to me to be quite an important piece of work that needs doing as you're moving forward with developing language schools of people.
Thank you very much for that. Do you have anything else to come back on, Margaret? No, in which case I'll move on to Councillor Jake.
Thank you there. I appreciate the comment just made there about early years being the cornerstone of provision. That is good to hear, and it's so eminently sensible. One of my issues at the start of this is the lack of granularity in some of the projections. So clearly what we've got here is quite a lot of detail, and Councillor Peake just said now we're updating that right up to the minute. So we've got a lot of clarity there, but going forward it becomes much vaguer, and one might expect that over a 10-year plan. But what we don't see is a mapping of the losses and the gains within Welsh language provision that we are already aware about. So, for instance, the WESP highlights that one of the challenges that we have is some areas across Powys where there is not a lot of easily accessible provision. And one of those areas, for instance, is Prestine in East Radnorshire. And what the WESP is doing is aligning itself with the strategy for transformation. And that strategy itself, a result of that process, is that Dolai School, which is the only accessible school to East Radnorshire, is proposed for closure. And yet that school, which has a reception in Welsh, Kilty Maithrin, one of only 17 such settings in Powys, providing 10 places, and if I read this correctly, an active Welsh language preschool group, a Kilty Tai Vai, and what is clear to me is that the loss of these places isn't transparent in the WESP as we're going forward. So in an area where we are seeing a statement to say that we will do more by way of early years provision, by all Welsh provision towards East Radnorshire, the one option that the school had put forward to transition across to Welsh language and draw pupils in from the East has been summarily dismissed. And I'm just wondering whether the WESP ought to be more specific about some of the pluses and losses in the plan, rather than just losing that granular detail in some of its county-wide aspirations. Because going forward, it looks like we're making a continuum of progress, whereas actually on a sub-regional basis, in some of those areas of identified need, it looks to me like actually we're losing places and not replacing them. So a little clarity about that and whether or not the WESP needs to be adjusted to pick that up, please.
Not sure who wants to take that one forward. Eirig or Marianne?
Yeah, okay, I'll start. Yeah, just to say, as I've said previously, we need to look at areas where there's a critical mass, so that the growth can be achieved. So we'd be looking at areas such as towns, the main towns, for the development of any Tier V provision, followed on into Kilty Maithrin provision, following on then into, obviously, we need to look at the primary sector then. So that's my response to that one.
Thank you for that, Marianne. I will, though, offer a little follow-up on that. You're saying you're looking at the towns, but I'm looking at the 24 existing TRV, and I'm seeing Cray, Llanbista, Dolly, Pont Roberts, Dyffryn Banw, Penabont Fawr. I won't read them all, but these aren't towns, these are villages where there is development from the community. So I would ask the question, why are we so confident that developing in the towns is actually where there is the groundswell of support? Because surely if there was a groundswell of support there, they would have emerged already.
I think it's about strategic planning of the whole of the continuum, isn't it? It's about looking at where it was best to develop the provision from the early age right through, and we have to take that strategic view. Yes, there are Kilty and B provision scattered all around the county in as you say, in villages, in small villages as well. But really, if we need to work with our partners to develop where we can see that the growth will be, where the main opportunities are to increase the numbers of bilingual speakers. So I take the point, but they are scattered around the county.
Can I just come back there? Because, I mean, the worry I have is we're removing that provision, which is the only provision there that looks across to the east. I know there's some in Llanbista, but that really doesn't look east because of the big hills in the way. And I'm seeing in the west no other components of the strategy at the granular detail that tells me that there are plans in place to develop specifics, other than saying we hope they come forward in Knighton, Prestine, or wherever they are over in the east, in the Prestine catchment. So we're taking away known provision, and I'm not seeing us replacing it. And I think we need to be more honest in the west about that scorecard.
Okay, I think, Emma, you waved a hand at me. You wanted to come in.
Thank you, Chair. Thank you. Just in respect of clearly what we're putting forward is the strategy, the granular detail. That next level of detail comes in terms of the plan, the timing of which we're not going to open the debate about the Dolly school here. I'm afraid we're not. We've had the scrutiny on that element. So from a strategic perspective, obviously the aspiration is we want to increase the Welsh language as much as we can across the county. What will happen is it'll be easier in some areas than it is in others because of the volume in terms of language spoken in that area already. Also the links that we've got available. I'm working with those partners and working through those pathways, as Marianne has said, and actually has good experience in doing so, of developing this in parts of the county. It's that experience that we'd be looking to take forward and work with those willing partners and willing localities to take forward. And then I think we've just got to be really honest that we will be looking to work with all 13 localities, but over a 10-year plan. It's going to take some time, and as I say, some will be harder than others, but it's the strategy. And we take on board the earlier comments, Chair. I think you made around the baseline. We can include a baseline. I think it's really important to do so we can see where our starting point is, and then how far we've moved as we implement and monitor the delivery of the strategy.
Okay, I'm going to draw this section on location to a close with just one observation from myself. It's a specific one to the Cumry catchment, but it's different and it's an observation. At the moment, it's easy to identify the catchments and the immediate areas where there is no provision. So Crickhow, limited in Gwenaved. But I notice within the Cumry catchment, even though it's got a higher percentage of Welsh speakers historically, there's no provision in Llanwrtyd Wales. So what I would ask you to do when you're looking at this is also to look at the distribution of availability in the larger catchments, and just because there is some in the area, not to fall away from the idea that everything is right and that some of these catchments have room for improvement as well. And I would urge you to look at that as a fairly urgent issue, because it's those areas that are going to drive through the pupils to make Welsh medium high schools, which we'll talk about later, sustainable. Lucy, Councillor Lucy.
Thank you, Chair. I just wanted to raise something about the TFE, which I'm pleased to see that there's a group has just started up in Llandrynio, started last Monday, which is great news. But I'd be very interested to know how many children or families have actually attended it, because the advertising was very limited, and I just think it's really important, if we're going to introduce these groups and put effort into it, that they are properly, that the community is made well aware of them, because the advertisement that initially went out was just in Welsh. So if somebody who wasn't a Welsh speaker read it, they wouldn't know what it was all about. And I contacted the organiser, and they've now come up with a much better poster that explains what it's about, and that's really helpful. But it's something that we need to be aware of, because we won't encourage new Welsh speakers unless we are prepared to explain properly what it's all about and why it's important. Thank you.
Thanks for that, Lucy. It does open a wider question, is if we're working with these providers, might it not be an idea for us to support some generic material to promote the openings, so that we can learn from one area and act as a catalyst to improve the communication into an area when a new group is starting? Emma, do come in. I'm seeing you nodding.
Yeah, Chair, I'm happy that we take that away and see what we can do in terms of that joint promotions. And thank you very much for the comment, Councillor Lucy and Councillor Pete. Appreciated.
Thanks, Emma. Councillor Edwin.
Thank you, Chair. Just really carrying on from where you left off, Marianne, the concern that you are showing for Brecon High regarding teaching through the medium of Welsh, is there a magic wand we can wave? That really, I know they're having great difficulty in sourcing teachers as it is now, but we are losing the bulk of children who want to go through the medium of Welsh down to Ystlafera. And yet, looking at Senny Bridge School, I was just looking at the figures earlier on. Now we are up to about 52, 53 between foundation and juniors, who are doing extremely well. But in the early years, sadly, it's very pidgin Welsh that is being taught there, you know. I've got grandchildren there and they're fluent in Welsh, but they're coming back speaking more English than Welsh. And yes, they're doing a great job down in Ystlafera, but is there a magic wand we can wave to keep them in Breconshire, shall we say, especially in Brecon High? Coming back briefly on Senny Bridge, apparently on the 2024, the Welsh is going to be quite heavy at the Senny Bridge School. So things are looking good there.
Okay, thanks for that, Edwin, but I'm trying to focus on one objective at a time. So can we take the high school ones when we get there? I think also that the specific issues around quality at an individual school are not really appropriate for this forum, because there is no opportunity for the school to respond. But there was a larger point there around transition and development. And as we're moving on a little bit, I wonder whether you've got any observations as to how things are moving forward in terms of the transition between preschool and primary, as that's where we're moving into in the next discussion from officers. Are we seeing improvements in that, and what are the plans for improvement in the future? Eric, Marianne, any?
Eric, do you want to come in there?
The figures that we've had from the Mydred Maithrin, and we work well with them, is that about 90% of pupils transferred from early years, or Welsh medium early years, into our Welsh medium education in 2020. We haven't got the figures for 2021 yet. We haven't had that information from Mydred as well. So we'll try and find that to see how much the percentage was going through.
Thanks, Eric. And obviously with the edits that happen between now and when Welsh Government sign it off, that again, the same comments apply. when we're talking about transition, do we, and this is almost operational, but it is relevant, do we have any indications as to whether there are any areas where we have concerns about the numbers that are coming through at the lower level? I mean, do we have any Welsh medium primary education that's at risk in that respect?
Do you mean in terms of early years?
Well, in terms of the early years where we're seeing a decline in an area that may indicate an early problem for a primary school 2 or 3 years down the line, or is everything stable?
Most of our early years Welsh medium settings are fairly stable. What we would say is some of them are quite small. So, you know, the numbers that they're attracting can be, you know, below 8, and those can make it difficult when you have to fund up to 2 adults for each setting. So, you know, those are ones there, but we're working with each of those settings to ensure that we can try to provide them because we know that there is a need for the provision out in those areas. We wouldn't want that provision to be lost, but most are holding their own over the course of a year. So we would hope that we wouldn't need to have any form where we would lose any of those settings in the near future anyway.
Thanks.
Sorry,
very
Marianne
much.
wanted to come in.
Yeah, can I come in? Sorry, I haven't got can't find my hand, so I'll go like this. We're going to aim for 100% transition from our early years Welsh medium settings into Welsh medium primary provision. That is the aim. A lot of it is down to promotion and providing that information to parents and families from a very, very early age. I'm going back to that word, the pathway again, to know what the provision is. Should they take the step to put the child into a Cylch Meithrin, particularly if they're from homes where they're not traditionally or naturally Welsh speakers, it is a leap of faith to some extent. So they need to have the confidence to know that that provision of quality is going to be there right through. There's a significant amount of work that the authority has already done to improve the promotional materials that it uses. And I understand that RHAG, the National RHAG Parents for Welsh Medium, have also recently received a grant to aid local authorities with the promotional aspects as well. So we look forward to that. But it is key that parents and families know from the day one what that route is, and to have an understanding of what Welsh medium provision is, and that it isn't, you won't come out of Welsh medium as a monoglot, you'll come out of Welsh medium provision as a bilingual speaker. And I think Delith has got a hand up and she's probably going to add to what I'm saying here. But promotion, information sharing and giving people confidence is key to all transition points, but in particular the earlier transition point.
Thanks very much for that. Do come in, Delith. You know what I'm going to say?
Sorry, I forgot to unmute. Diolch yn fawr. Prynhawn da bawb, I'm Delith, the School Improvement Advisor. Yes, I agree with promotion is key here and will probably be a thread, as Councillor Lucy has already alluded to with the early years, the TFE. But also, I think that leadership has a key role here as well. And communication with parents, with carers, the transition links, again, when we come to outcome 2 will be the same. I think leaders inviting parents, inviting carers to the presentation, that they have an understanding of language acquisition. And this is a key point that Estyn have made in their document, which is a valuable one on language acquisition that was published earlier in the year. And I think also, as well as leadership, having good transition arrangements, taking the parents with us along with the promotion. I think, again, best practice is that these leaders also work with Welsh language initiatives as Learn Welsh, giving the parents the opportunities to learn Welsh, to go on the journey with their children and understand the benefits of bilingualism. I think that's a thread throughout, and I just thought it's very appropriate for me to say that at this point. Diolch.
Thank you, Delith, and Anwyn as well. I was just going to go on to the next thing, but you got in just in time.
Diolch o galon, Cadeirydd. Thank you very much. Just to add on that element as well, as part of the new online admissions process that will be coming live in September 2022, we have ensured that we've added information there for parents so they can click on as they make their applications for primary and secondary school, information regarding the benefits of Welsh medium education. So hopefully, along with Delith's elements there of leadership, we've got another pronged attack as well, and of information to support parents in their decision making.
Thank you very much for that, Anwyn. I'm going to move on to outcome 2 now. I'll make the first observation that the Welsh mediums, that the data we've got here is just 1 year and as a snapshot, and maybe as an appendix, it would be nice to see a time series for these schools so that we have an understanding of the direction of travel going into this plan for them. 65 out of it versus 138 for pupils in Rhyadr. Was it 120 but Welsh speaking 2 years ago? Was it 10 2 years ago? We've got no indication of the direction of travel within the primary schools. And my question, while I wait for others to come in, we're seeing dual stream schools and we want to move along the line to more Welsh medium primaries. But what plans do we have to bring the next tier of Welsh potential Welsh primaries online by moving some entirely English medium schools into the past dual stream or single class category? I really can't have stumped you. I'm seeing no officers coming back to me on that one.
I can start if you like, Councillor Pete.
Go ahead, Marianne.
Okay. So we're into outcome 2, aren't we? So just
yes.
to recap, outcome 2 is around more reception class children, 5-year-olds receiving their education through the medium of Welsh. And this is the target for us. So if I just remind you of the target that we've set ourselves to increase year 1 pupils from currently 22.6% being educated through the medium of Welsh. We've gone to the top of our range as a local authority, so of 36% educated through the medium of Welsh, which means an additional 163 actual pupils needed in year 1 Welsh medium provision. So it is quite a challenging target, but it gives you the idea of the scale of what it is we're tackling. So that's a starting point. I think Delith is here.
Yeah. Diolch, Marianne. And councillors, as you're aware, we've already got a pilot in Ystad Gynlais in Cribbarth, where we have a reception class in September 2021 that started through the medium of Welsh and obviously going to year 1 again. And also we have a very ambitious vision at Ysgol Bro Caerenion, where that will be, if it's agreed, when the full governing body, where they would like to develop Welsh medium, but obviously that would be subject to consultation. But that's the aim, where we increase the offer of Welsh medium education in the reception classes of some of our dual stream schools.
Okay, that's the start point, but we're going to go on to high schools eventually. But to have those Welsh medium high schools in a sustainable way, we're going to need more Welsh medium primary pupils coming through. You mentioned in a couple of catchments that you will attempt to improve the provision, but there's nothing really concrete here. to say how that will be. So how do you envisage growing the provision over the course of this programme in those areas where you're identifying that there will be a Welsh medium high school, bearing in mind it takes 6-7 years for pupils to start to actually get to the high school?
I think it goes back to what we've already discussed, increasing, it's the continuum, isn't it? The pathways right across, the promotion, the advantages of bilingualism, making sure that at every transition point, for example, we've just discussed the early years from the mid-yard to the reception class, leaders selling the advantages of bilingualism, ensuring that there's support there for the parents through the Learn Welsh, as an example, the various Mudiadau, various outside agencies that can support, and then promoting the benefits, taking them on the continuum, again, transition points, and promoting the advantages. And of course, we've got our trochi provision. And I know from the area that I live in that there is an increase. And I take your point about having the trends in the data here with the dual stream and with the Welsh medium. I think that'll be really interesting. And it would show or highlight the growth that we've got in some of our dual stream schools. Taking an example I've already mentioned is Ysgol Gynradd Llanfaircyreinion, Ysgol Rhyw Bechan. There is a growth there in the Welsh medium foundation class through promotion, through the advantages. And it's coming back to that same thread line, but the pathway, the advantages have to be clear. The support has to be there for trochi. And again, going, you know, any late comers coming in, they need, like Anwen has alluded to, through admissions, they need to know that there is an opportunity for them to be supported through immersion at different points, and that is available within their catchment or as close as possible to where the need is.
I think that's really helpful, and the absence of the time series is really quite unfortunate, because it makes it really, really difficult for us to be able to give full assurance going forward, because we can't see whether there is growth or whether there is decline, and that's a very significant concern that I have that we'll explore further on the high school side. Hanshaw, I know you've got your hand up, but I suspect Bryn is coming in a response to this. So I'm going to take Councillor Bryn first and then come back to you.
Okay, iawn, sorry Angela, diolch yn iawn Cadeirydd. Dwi'n ymwybodol iawn bod yna dosbarth trochi wedi cael ei sefydlu yn y Dre Newydd yn ystod y flwyddyn diwethaf. Ac yn ôl hyn dwi'n deall, mae wedi bod yn hynod o lwyddiannus, ac fyswn ni eisiau llongyfarchu ar hynny. Ngofid i ydy, hyd y gwni, bod yna nesaf pethau dim hysbysebu o'r cyfle oedd ar gael i blant oed cynradd yn Maldwyn a Gogledd Sir Feistr. Sut allwn ni dod dros y fater yma? Achos i fod yn deg, fe ddyle bod y cyfle wedi cael ei hysbysebu yn pob un ysgol gynradd cyfrwng Saesneg a phob un ffrwd Saesneg mewn ysgol dwy ffrwd. Ac os ydy'r darpariaeth i barhau, gan obeithio i fod o, oes yna camau yn digwydd i hysbysebu yn pob un ysgol cyfrwng Saesneg a ffrwd Saesneg yn fuan iawn?
Os ga i ddod i mewn ymateb i Gynghorydd Bryn, mae rhaid ni gofio, be dyn ni wedi wneud ydy sefydlu cynllun pilot trochi yn nghanol argyfwng Covid. Mi roedden ni wedi dechrau rhoi darpariaeth rhithiol mewn amgylchiadau anodd, fel ydych chi'n gwybod. Felly, gan mai pilot ydy hwn, a dwi eisiau pwysleisio, mae beth ni wedi sefydlu yn Drenewydd ydy pilot. Mwyn i ni gael datblygu'r gweithlu yn staff ni, y swyddogion y Gymraeg sydd wedi bod trwy broses o newid, mwyn i ni gael datblygu'r adnoddau a dysgu wrth fynd ymlaen gwerthuso fel popeth newydd effeithiolrwydd o. Ac mi nawn ni hynny, a mi fydd na adroddiad arno fo. Dyn ni wedi bod yn hynod o ffodus o gael grant da o'r 2.2 y cyhoeddiad y gweinidog, achos dwi yn credu allai ddatgan bod ganddo ni gefnogaeth, a dwi yn gobeithio hir dymor y gweinidog ar gyfer trochi. Mae'n gweld o fel blaenoriaeth, mae'n gweld llafar a darllen hefyd fel blaenoriaeth. O ran yr hyrwyddo, mi roedden ni wedi hyrwyddo fo ar gyfer y trochi rhithiol, a dyna oedd y cohort oedd ganddo ni 12 disgybl oedden ni'n gallu cymryd ar gyfer y trochi, ac mi roedden ni'n llawn. Mi roedd ganddo ni 11 disgybl erbyn y diwedd, dyna faint ddoth. Dyn ni wedi parhau efo'r trochi rwan tan Chwefror, mwyn ymestyn a chodi'r bar. Chymod, mewn amgylchiadau anodd eto dechrau tymor yma, a dwi'n meddwl bod angen eto mae cyfathrebu, fel dwi wedi dweud, yn mynd i fod yn llunyn trwy hwn i gyd. A dwi'n siŵr fydde'n cyfarwyddwraig Lynette yn derbyn hynny. Mae cyfathrebu yn allweddol, a mae eisiau ni wneud yn gorau rwan i hyrwyddo effaith y cynllun trochi yma. Mae'r ddarpariaeth trochi yn rhywbeth dyn ni fel sir eisiau ehangu arno. A fydd na well cyfathrebu, mi fydd na astudiaethau achos o beth dyn ni wedi gwneud yn y Drenewydd. Dyn ni'n gobeithio cael cameos neu fideos, siarad efo rhai o rieni. Ond chybod, mae trochi'n fwy na jyst y trochi. Mae rhaid i ni sicrhau rwan 100% bod y disgyblion yma'n parhau ar y siwrne yma i addysg Gymraeg. A mae hyrwyddo hynny yn allweddol hefyd. Ond yn sicr, mae yna gyfle i bawb, ond pilot oedd hwn, felly.
Ydyn ni'n gallu symud yn syth ymlaen?
Diolch, Delys. Bryn, do you want to come back?
Yeah. Ydyn ni'n gallu symud ymlaen yn syth o'r pilot i'r darpariaeth parhaol. Hynny yw, fydd na cohort arall yn cychwyn yn mis Mai, mis Ebrill, achos mae'n bwysig bod os ydych chi'n dechrau cymryd bylchau yn y darpariaeth, mae'r profiad yn diflannu, a mae angen, mae gwelliant yn gallu digwydd tra'n gwneud y gwaith, Dwi'n angen eistedd nôl ag sbio nôl am flwyddyn y ddwy a gweld lle sy'n lle gychwyn nesaf. Fydd o'n parhau sydd bin.
Dwi'n yn gwybod, mae Lynette ar ei llaw fyny. Di Lynette eisiau dod mewn fan hyn. Sorry, Cadeirydd. Does Lynette want to come in? She put her hand up before I...
Lynette, please come in. And I don't want us to get trapped in looking at the details of operations, and you need to keep us fairly high level. Apologies, Bryn. Lynette?
Yeah, just thank you, Chair. Just to say that obviously this is a major part of the strategy. Well, you know, as we're presenting to you today, this trochi immersion, we are, as Delith has said, piloting it, but it is a firm part of the strategy that we intend to develop and make sure is a firm part of our strategic plan going forward.
It'll continue for now. Well, I just eisiau gwybod os ydy pryd mae'r cohort nesaf yn cael ei gyfyd mewn.
I think it's really important that trochi in Powys is planned according to need. We need to, if we have got the need, we have got 12 or 16 families that need trochi provision, then I think that's a discussion that we have with Lynette and senior officers. We do provide, don't we, Lynette, according to need.
Absolutely, yeah, and I am not on mute, I couldn't see then. Yeah, I mean, the need was very clear. Now, as we, as you know from, as I don't want to go into too much detail, but we are with the 11 that we have on this cohort. Progress has been good. It's working well, and it has having an impact on children, and it's from according to need. But we can utilize that provision from right up in the top in Pennant and we're actually got children from Llanbester who are accessing that provision at the moment. So the need, and we can provide, you know, transport, etc., to provide that when the need arises. And as Delis said, should there be further need and another cohort required, we will address that need.
Well,
thanks.
Good advertising generates need, and we all know that the need is the need is permanent.
Yeah, I think you're right. And I think one theme that's definitely coming through today already, you know, promotion for Welsh medium education is key in this plan going forward. You know, just going back to outcome 1, the decisions need to be made there and parents need to have all the information and make those key decisions. And we need to be communicating it effectively as part of our Welsh education strategic plan.
Thanks for that, Lynette. I know I had spoken previously about the need for a review and a report to come to scrutiny from this first round, not to stop things, but to learn the lessons. I don't think we will see it before PERDA, but it would be a very useful piece of information to share, perhaps as a very early piece of scrutiny for the new committee, as something that they can test themselves and get a feel for the feel for things on. So, and perhaps you could think about bringing that forward early on in the new term. Marianne, I know you've had your hand up for a while. I am keen to make progress and move to Angela. Is there anything specifically new that you wanted to add that hasn't been covered by Delis and Lynette's intervention subsequently?
Just quickly going back to your question about how we intend to move the schools along the language continuum, etc. We have 3 types of schools in Powys, don't we? So we have Welsh medium primary schools, we have English medium primary schools, and we have dual stream primary schools. And you'll see from the document that we're very, very clear that all those 3 categories of schools have a big part to play in increasing the numbers of Welsh speakers that we have in the county. But in terms of the specifics around how we move each one along the language continuum, it all depends on the very nature of that school. So we have English medium schools. Lynette and Delis will know this far better than I. We have English medium schools in the county who have a very strong Welsh ethos. So there are Welsh speaking staff, and the Welsh language is heard frequently, etc. So we need to work with those schools to see if there's staffing capacity there to start providing, you know, a Welsh medium class. So it would be dialogue with these individual schools that the team already know and have identified. So with dual stream schools, again, we know the schools, we know the proportion of language splits between the streams. Case in point, say Ysgol Dyffryn Trannon, which Cabinet made a decision on earlier, last year, looking at the proportion of numbers of pupils in the streams and the staffing available, etc., and the appetite to move along to become a Welsh medium school. And then obviously with our Welsh medium schools, we need those Welsh medium schools to flourish and grow. So you're looking at the likes of Ysgol Gymraeg y Trallwng and the part that they have to play locally and wider in terms of promotion of Welsh medium, etc., in order to fill that school. So we'd be looking at each one individually, and working with schools is key to the development. And that is what we intend. That's what we intend to do. So,
thank you for that. I'm pleased to hear that, because that is something Scrutiny have recommended to you previously. Angela, I've kept you waiting for a while. Please come in now.
Thank you, Chair. My worry, really, I am slightly worried. So in the outcomes and objectives, the starting word on each one is more. So more children through the medium of Welsh at each stage. And obviously that's a good idea. And under each section in the report, it gives the numbers of how you see those projected figures rising. I'm slightly curious how you can set those figures. Like, is it just projected on previous figures, but given we're looking to increase, that wouldn't make sense. So I wonder, where do those figures really come to? I'm really concerned, following up from what Jake said, that we're not getting the full picture here, because I know you don't want to talk about dollar, so let's not mention an individual school, but if a provision is closing, so where else is it rising? So I would have liked to have seen where. So for example, school A has got X number of pupils and you're going to say it's having X. I think we need more specific. And the other thing that I'm concerned about is that everything you've said so far goes from the assumption that parents or pupils are seeking Welsh language. And I'm sure that's true of some, but for an awful lot of the children who are currently having their education through the medium of Welsh, they're there because the opportunity was available. So those parents at preschool were not seeking Welsh medium education, but there was availability of Welsh medium play school, which they took up with no intention of going on further. But because the provision was good, because they made friends, because they're part of a group, their children move along that continuum. And so I think that a key thing that you are missing is that there needs to be good promotion of the Welsh language. Yes, you've said that, but there needs to be opportunity in all areas. And if you're closing down one venue or another, then there's a lost opportunity in that area. That's not enough in itself. The provision then needs to be of a high enough quality to persuade the parents that it's worth investing in for the future. Because like it or not, an awful lot of parents in Powys are not Welsh speakers, and nothing's going to change there in the short term, no matter how many classes per parent you put on in school. And I don't think enough has been said about availability, opportunity and quality. And I'd like some comment on that, please.
Dallas, you jumped in before everyone else, so all yours.
Diolch, Angela. I think from September 2022 and ongoing, one opportunity, well, it's not an opportunity, it's going to be, is the new curriculum. The curriculum for Wales is there, as we know, for Wales. And one thing is set up, it removes the artificial distinction, as you know, between Welsh, Welsh second language. But what we want is all our learners, they need to use Welsh as per the 4 purposes. So again, it's back to promotion, but we need the Welsh language and culture underpin the 4 purposes. So the benefits are there as part of the new curriculum. It's a new opportunity. We need to normalise bilingualism here in Wales. We've got the Cymraeg 2050. We've got the Welsh Government's vision of 1 million Welsh speakers. I think the key message here right across all our authorities is that we need to normalise Welsh language, and hopefully the WESP as a strategic plan for the local authority supports that vision. That's what we want at the high level to do, is to normalise, develop our staff, develop the advantages, promote them and bring everybody together with us as part of this plan. Dwi'n gweld bod Emma, I can see Emma's got her hand up. Diolch.
Emma wants to come in, but Angela, do you want to come back first?
Yeah, that didn't answer my question at all, actually, because we're not talking about making every place school in Powys Welsh language. We're not talking about making every school Welsh language. We're talking about trying to increase the numbers of pupils who are being educated through the medium of Welsh. So it's not the same thing, Della, sorry. I get what you're saying, that Welsh should be normalised, totally agree. I get what you're saying, it would be wonderful if everybody in Wales could speak Welsh to a level, yeah, but that's not what this report is proposing. You're not proposing to make education in Wales, in Powys, Welsh.
Thanks,
sorry, I don't understand your answer.
I'm going to bring Emma in, and when she does come in and responds to that, I'm also going to ask her if she could respond to the question from me as to what evidence we have in preparing this from discussions with parents to determine the amount of demand that is being unmet at the moment. Do we have evidence in Prestine, in Crickhowell, that there is latent demand for Welsh that gives us some confidence that these numbers can be met? Lynette's put her hand up, Emma's put her hand down, so I'm going to let Lynette come first because I suspect she may have answers that Emma will be happy to hear first.
I beat you to it there, Emma. Sorry, no. Thank you, Chair. I don't know whether I'm really answering your question here, Angela, either, but I'm just going back to the fact that, you know, when Eston came in 2019, you know, we were in a situation, we're still in that situation where we have to improve Welsh medium provision. We have to ensure that our learners across the authority, there's inequity at the moment, depending on where you live within this local authority as to what provision you have, be it from Kilch, be it in primary, etc. So we have to have a plan that ensures that in every area of this local authority, for primary school, the provision is there so that the opportunities are there should parents want to choose for their children to be bilingual. And that is what we want to promote. As we've said earlier, we've got work to do in that area to make sure that even at a young age, the younger the children are, the better, although we are seeing good results from our Trochi provision. But we have to have a strategic plan across the local authority. We are one of the local authorities where Welsh medium provision has been not growing as significantly as in most other local authorities in Wales, and that's concerning, and it was a concern of Eston. Eston have subsequently been in to this local authority. They've seen the plan that we're putting before you today, and they've commented on that plan as part of the monitoring visit, and obviously in response to the strategic plan. But the Eston feel that this strategy can deliver what we need to do in this local authority to ensure that Welsh medium provision is enhanced, progressed, and gives our learners the opportunities across the local authority. It's not there yet, and this is what our 10-year plan needs to do. It needs to address the inequity. We're not talking about closing down. We want more Kilch TRVs or whatever going forward. We want, you know, we want more Welsh medium provision in terms of moving forward into the primary. We do want those 13 locations within our towns. As we've said, we want clear progression from early years, and Eston were very clear about this when they came in. The local authority needs to have a strategic plan that addresses the pathway. You'll know yourselves, I sent my children through Welsh medium provision in this local authority. I made that decision from the outset, and they went through Welsh medium provision right the way through their education. And it is a whole school pathway. And that's what we've got to get right in this plan that we're presenting today. We have got to get provision for the early years. We've got to get primary provision right. We've got to get secondary provision right, so that you know, we're behind now. This 10-year plan has got to address the pathways that all of our children should have the opportunity in this local authority. I may have rambled on a little bit there, Angela, but what I'm trying to say is we've got to get it in every cluster, in those 13 clusters across Powys. We've got to get equality of Welsh medium provision throughout, so that every learner has the opportunities that they should be having in 21st century Wales.
Angela?
Can I ask then, so are you confident that you can recruit enough members of staff of a high enough quality to deliver that provision?
That's a key point, Angela, and that is something we recognise in Outcome 7. The workforce development here is key as well, to go alongside our plans. And in Outcome 7, I know Councillor Pete wanted to go through each outcome, but can I just touch on that now?
I was going to say, let's deal with Outcome 7 now as it's come up, rather than jumping back to it later.
Yeah, you know, absolutely. The workforce development is key. We know that, you know, we have had sabbaticals for some of our staff, but actually we need to improve. We need to improve our professional learning and enhance that offer for our teaching staff, so that we're able to cover, you know, we know even in the COVID crisis, where Welsh medium schools, if they've got teachers off, have struggled to get Welsh medium supply in and have to cover. So the workforce development part of this strategy is a key element for us seeing this vision through in the next 10 years. So you'll see in outcome 7, there are things that we need to do. We need to work closely with Aberystwyth universities, look at that sabbatical scheme again, because perhaps it isn't having the impact we'd like it to have going forward. And we know that going forward, we'll be able to work with other local authorities, perhaps in the Mid Wales partnership with Ceredigion, looking to enhance the professional learning. That is key for all of this, plus making this an attractive offer for people to come to Powys to live and work, but really growing our own and developing our own. Outcome 7 is key. And it has to be our ambition that we develop the workforce effectively to deliver this vision.
Lynette, on
Can I make one more comment?
Yeah, go on, Angela. Sorry. Go ahead.
My other comment is you keep talking about the pathway and how important it is that families can see from Tier B through to sixth form that the provision is there. But please don't turn your back on those families who will take their children to Tier B with no intention of going further, because they can be persuaded along the way. They might then go to Kilchmaithrin with no intention of going into Welsh medium education, but if opportunity is there, they may take that next step. There are families, I am one of those families, who will do it one step at a time, but need to be reassured that the quality is there and the support is there for the family. So it isn't all about the pathways. It's about each stage proving itself.
Yeah.
Do come back on that.
Yeah, I agree, Angela. And actually, you know, again, promotion and looking at each step is very important. It's more prevalent actually from key stage 2 to 3, and you'll see that in the figures that we've got where we have drop off from key stage 2 to 3. So we have to make sure our secondary provision going forward is good enough and is good for people to be able to make those choices, because we're at a place at the moment where perhaps parents are making the choice to perhaps not carry on at key stage 3 with their Welsh medium education because the choice and the offer isn't broad enough, etc., etc. So you're right, we do have to work with families at each stage, as well as making sure at the very beginning they've got that pathway. And I have to say, we've had the opposite as well. So in response to Councillor Bryn's comments earlier, we've had this year children in the mid Powys area who've been attending English medium schools but want to transfer into the Welsh stream within Mid Powys, and I think it's 2 or 3 of those children, year 4, year 6, are on the Trochi immersion programme as we speak, and that's from promotion and talking with parents at that late stage, if you like, at key stage 2, and reassuring them that there is provision there for them. That's why it's important we've got our Trochi provision as well. So I agree, we have to engage at every stage along the way to help parents and reassure them that everything, but we need to make sure we've got that provision in place too.
Lynette, thanks for that. I'm going to stay with the workforce strand, and I will make the very broad observation and challenge to you that it's not smart. All of the other sections have got key milestone targets, whereas this one at 5 years, we have a narrative. And it's going to be very difficult 5 years down the line when you're coming back to this committee to say we met our objectives, because the objectives are very, well, they're a narrative, they're not a set of targets. They are unclear as to what good looks like, let alone what very good looks like. So I would challenge you there that this section is not as well developed and not as focused as the other parts of the document, and it's noticeable that there isn't much red in it, which means it hasn't changed very much over the last 6 months, and I feel it's still underdeveloped. That's a personal view. The rest of the committee may disagree. But I would look to see some more improvement there, and hopefully, again, when you're interacting with Welsh Government before this is finalised, you might have time to look at that. Lynette.
Yeah, no, thank you, Councillor Beattie. We'll take that on board. Underneath our Welsh Education Strategic Plan, we have a workforce development plan as well as part of our. So, you know, we've got clear, we will have, and we have got for this year, clear targets for how many you know, in terms of workforce development planning, what we need in each areas, what our needs are, etc. So there is a plan underneath this, but I take your point that in the strategic plan, there maybe needs to be more data as to what we expect, how many teachers by this time, whatever. So I'll take that on board. Thank you.
Thank you for that, Lynette. It is very much more narrative than factual. I mean, just quickly scanning through now, yeah. I don't think there is one table in that section whereas they're dotted all over the others.
Yeah, no.
So where we are, where we're getting to, just to give us a bit more confidence in the direction.
Yeah, you take that on board, and we can add information from our workforce development plan into this. Thank you, Councillor Pete. Yeah.
Thank you. Councillor Bryn. Bryn, if you're talking, you're neither mute nor you're both mute and not visible.
Sorry. Yeah.
We've got you now.
Like it. Yeah. Okay. Well, na fi rhoi llaw fi'n reidiol I fyny efo cwestiwn cysylltiedig ar strand cynharach, ond na I sticio at datblygiad staff cwestiwn. Oes da, ydy'r sir yn ystyried rhyw gymhelliant I gael fyfyrwyr lefel A I astudio Cymraeg lefel A? Achos fel dwi'n ei deallu ar hyn o bryd, mae yna un yn Llanfyllin, dwi'n siŵr os oes un o gwbl yn Llanfer Creinion ar y funud yn astudio lefel A, ac does dim lot mwy yn Machynlleth, so mwy na lai, trwy'r sir cyfan, 2 neu 3 fyfyriwr lefel A Cymraeg sydd I cael ar hyn o bryd. Mae'r sefyllfa yna yn dor calonus. Dwi'n gwybod o ble mae'n hythrawon Cymraeg i'r dyfodol yn mynd I ddod. Rwyfaint o ystyriaeth wedi cael ei roi mewn i'r agwedd hynny.
Thank you for that, Bryn. I'm going to ask officers to hold off on responding on that because that touches very much on outcome 4, and I'd like to get us back on track, having jumped to the workforce one because we've got the transition to secondary school first before we get there. Margaret, do you have a question on outcome 2 or on workforce? Otherwise, we'll move on to outcome 3. Carry on through. Let's finish off workforce and then move back to outcome 3.
Yes. Well, I mentioned previously the audit of all the early years staff that is going to take place regarding their proficiency and skills in the Welsh language. Now, what information do we have on our workforce in schools? Presumably we've got that information as a baseline, their proficiency in and skills in the Welsh language.
Lynette?
Yeah, we have that across all of our schools, really, the same as it is in the council, where, you know, all of our staff have to say what proficiency they're at, and certain jobs require certain proficiency. So, for example, when we're, you know, recruiting to a headship, for example, in a dual stream school, the proficiency level would be determined. So we have all of that information for our staff.
So when we're talking about developing staff, we've got a baseline there then.
Yeah, we've got a baseline.
Staff proficiency to use. That's what I was looking at statistically and etc.
Yeah, we've got that information, and also, you know, we're looking at those members of staff whose proficiency might be, and we've already got examples in dual stream schools of people who have been on training and their proficiency now is improving, and they're moving perhaps from a 2 to a 4. So that's the kind of thing that we've got. We've got the programs that we need to put in place to develop that proficiency level. And we are beginning to see that happening across dual streams where teachers who came in actually to the local authority with little or no Welsh are showing some improved proficiency in their Welsh language skills.
But that's not data that can come into this document as a as we move forward to measure as a measure.
Yeah,
Margaret beat me to it. I was going to request that as an appendix or a table in that section. Again, we need to know the baseline, we need to know where we are, and we need to know the potential, because as Sandra has pointed out in the chat, getting access to Welsh language supply teachers is difficult. We need to know where our skills are so that we can understand who we can develop from within the workforce to fill some of these gaps. So that would be a very useful addition. Delith, do you want to? I've got Emma jumping in, which is probably a response to me. So can I take her first and then bring you in?
Yes.
Emma.
It's just with the workforce, obviously, it is extremely challenging, as we know, and everything that's been discussed. And the sooner we can provide the provision for our young people, and the more bilingual speakers we have, hopefully those then that move into the teaching profession, we can retain and have that workforce going forward. But clearly there's a lead in time to that, and no overnight fix. I was just wondering from a Scrutiny perspective, whether the things that Scrutiny have considered from a workforce perspective that as officers we haven't, and that actually we should be taking on board and contributing, or at least considering in respect of the strategy.
I'm not sure we've got a response to that, although Councillor Sandra's put her hand up and Councillor Jake had. I'll take those and I'll think on that, if that's okay. Councillor Sandra.
Thank you, Chair. Yes, just picking up from that, in one of the previous Wests, mention was made about increasing or improving the links between a neighbouring authority in order to have transition from a primary school for children to be able to go to secondary school and continue through the medium of Welsh. That was not followed through for whatever reason. It's written in the WESP now, a little bit vaguely. Estein has picked up on that and said something that should be done. My concern is when we are looking at youngsters and they do go out of county for whatever reason, and in this case it's Welsh language, I'm feeling that there is a gap here, because they are still our children, they're still Powys children, they still come back to play and the rest of it within Powys, but they're going out just for their Welsh lessons, etc. So we should be capturing their progress and reporting on that, because I'm being proud of that and showing those youngsters that they are still belonging to Powys, so we can nurture their confidence and encourage them to return so that they are feeling welcome, rather than just saying, well, they're out of county now, we're not able to access that information, and it's more or less closing the door. So I've always said we lose our youngsters. They go out of county for universities, they go out of county for jobs, they meet their partners and they settle down elsewhere, and they return to visit elderly parents, unfortunately. We are a huge area in Powys. We've got loads of room to bring our youngsters back, and we need our youngsters back because they are our future. We should highly regard them, and we should show that interest and nurture it to encourage them to come back. And providing Welsh education opportunities for them is a fantastic way forward, because it opens up the door. I've got 3 youngsters, they all speak Welsh, and it's really opened the door for them. And one of the youngsters has got about 7 different languages, only through learning Welsh at a young age. So the opportunities are fantastic. We should utilise it. Thank you.
Thank you, Sandra. And Councillor Jake.
I'm afraid I didn't have anything on Emma's question about workforce, really, Councillor Peake. What I was looking to do, and I wasn't certain whether we were coming to an end of workforce, and I just wanted to make a general observation and come back to some of the granularity that I was talking about earlier. But Emma, you'll be grateful it's nothing to do with Dolai, but it is to do with the detail that's set out in the plan in respect of the ideas that we have currently for Ysgol Calon Cymru and the all Welsh provision in Builth going forward. And I'm wondering whether or not, bearing in mind we're only at the pre-consultation stage, which ends in a day or two at the moment, and the fact that I haven't seen any evidence yet to back up the suggestion, the model, the plan that is specified that will go out for consultation and engagement. I'm wondering whether or not that's the sort of detail we want to actually put in a 10-year plan, or whether we would be safer by saying we have an issue here that we want to address, rather than the plan actually identifying a preferred solution that you're suggesting, because otherwise this plan could go out of date very, very quickly. So this came upon my concern, as stated in here. There's only 14% of pupils going forward from Ysgol Trefonen up to Ysgol Canol Cymru at the moment, and I just haven't seen the evidence. I don't think Scrutiny has seen the evidence for this, and I'm just afeared that we put that detail in the plan when other details you've advised me earlier we're not putting in the plan. So it's my word of caution, really, and questioning as to why we're doing that.
Thanks on that, Councillor Jake. I'm going to hold that for a moment because I'm going to tie up workforce and then going to bring us back to transition, which you've asked one of the questions that I was going to ask. So we'll transition to it that way. In respect of workforce, Emma, my only suggestion that I would put back to you is that we should be enticing people at the teacher training stage. So it's not a workforce, but perhaps we should be considering some quite attractive bursaries for people that, regardless of where they come from, who are planning to take teacher training through the medium of Welsh, in exchange for a commitment of maybe 3 to 5 years working for the authority. By that time, they should be nicely settled in and wouldn't want to go somewhere else. So that's the one thing that I would say is possibly missing, that just as with HALPS coming back in-house, it offers the opportunity for us to offer modern apprenticeships for our 16 to 18-year-olds in that side of things. Maybe we ought to be offering a bursary, and quite an attractive one, to get people to commit to going through Welsh medium teacher training on the understanding that they've got a commitment back to the authority for a period of time, to develop things that way. If anyone else comes up with anything, I'm sure they will drop you an email after the meeting. So challenge accepted, and I hope beneficially delivered.
Yeah, thank you very much, Councillor Pete. Absolutely appreciate it. Thank you.
Thank you. Sarah, you've put your hand up, but I'm not sure whether you were responding to something that Councillor Jake said or something on workforce. That's a hand down. Okay, Councillor Sandra.
Sorry, Mr. Chair, I haven't lowered the hand. I'll do it now. Sorry, my apologies.
Okay, in which case, let's move back to section 3, and that's transition. And I do want to touch on Councillor Jake's comment there, because the one thing that stood out to me in looking at the new data that we had in front of us on transition is that only 14% transferred from Trefonen to Welsh medium, and only 22% transferred from Ysgol Dyffryn y Trallwng to Welsh medium. These are quite concerning. I did a little bit of digging within the community to try and come up with an answer on Trefonen. I only got one response, and it was, we didn't want, our son didn't want to go down to Builth because it meant he would lose contact with all his friends on the estate, because by the time he got back home, they would have all gone in for tea. So it's clearly just that one example is a community type wanting to retain friendship groups, bearing in mind the number of pupils at TRV and Kilk are from north of Llandrindod, and the only Welsh language primary provision in the catchment around Builth is actually in Builth itself. Should we be worried about these figures, and And do you have any information to counter that one piece of anecdotal evidence? Because at the moment, I'm seeing a huge risk that the numbers that are being projected for a Welsh medium school in Bilf may not materialise at this point if that's replicated elsewhere. And the last thing we want to have, bearing in mind in this catchment, we've gone from 2 schools to 1 school, both of which haven't worked out. The last thing we want is to establish a Welsh medium school that people decide is too small, and therefore they all put their pupils into the English medium school up in Llandrindod, and we're left with no Welsh provision in the area. And just concerned about that, and that then transfers to Welshpool, where we seem to have a similar lack of transference. What are the reasons for this? Because it is, I think, absolutely fundamental to the provision moving forward.
Shall I start?
By all means, Marianne. It was a bit longer than it was meant to be. It was meant to be a short question.
That's fine. But, bearing in mind we're still in the early engagement around Ysgol Calon Cymru, so that finishes on Wednesday. So if anybody wants to participate in that, then please do so. In terms of Trifonen, historically we've had low transition or variable transition rates from Trifonen's Welsh stream into the English stream. And obviously you only have one snapshot here, so we'll have a look at that and see if we can find the historical data as well. You could argue a number of ways, couldn't you? You could argue that they're not transitioning because the Welsh medium secondary isn't as accessible to them. It's not in Llandrindod, so you could argue that. But then you could also argue that are they informed enough about the benefits of Welsh medium secondary, etc. And also you could also argue about whether there's enough clear, good quality choice for them in Ysgol Calon Cymru. So if you go down, scroll down the document a little bit, and then you'll come to the actual choice number of subjects within the secondary sector, and you could see that the number of Welsh medium subjects compared to the number of English medium subjects, there is a clear disparity there. So go up to Welshpool, think about Welshpool as well. We've sort of the same kind of scenario. So Welshpool, Ysgol Cymraeg y Trallwng, very, very concerned about this, and we've had conversations with them about why their children aren't transferring into Welsh medium. Again, the closest Welsh medium provision for Ysgol Cymraeg y Trallwng pupils are in Ysgol Cyreinion, so in Cyreinion High School. So there is this issue about local secondary provision, but also is there a question around they're not seeing a full Welsh medium provision, and I think that is key probably for some of this. So it is something we need to work on, and this early engagement piece now around Ysgol Calon Cymru will point us in a direction. We'll have more understanding about the demand locally, etc. And it's really important when we're starting to develop these kind of plans that we do test the waters early enough so that we understand whether the provision is viable going forward and what we need to do to make it viable, etc. So it's all part of the same jigsaw. But I know we're focusing on Llandrindod area in particular, and obviously you've pointed out Ysgol Cymraeg y Trallwng. I think there are some other concerns as well. If you look at all the transition rates, so overall as a county, we only have 83% of our Welsh medium primary year 6s transferring into year 7. That is concerning. So they are choosing to opt out for English medium provision. And if you look then at the areas where there is 100% provision transfer rates, so you can see some of those areas, although the numbers are low in some areas. But overall, schools like David Llwyd in Newtown, a flagship Welsh medium primary school, again, not all of them transferring into Welsh medium provision. from school with a very strong Welsh medium ethos. So there's an issue around this transfer rate that we will need to tackle. And going back to Councillor Jake's point earlier around why have we specified a plan for Ysgol Calon Cymru and all age in built, etc., within this document, and not for some of the other developments that we will be taking forward. These plans have been approved by Cabinet, so they're in the public domain, so they are Cabinet approved plans. So if you look at the secondaries, we refer to Bro-Hylgen, Caerenion and Ysgol Calon Cymru. So that's the reason why. As you say, things may change, and we're not clear yet what the Welsh Government's approach will be about refreshing the WESP, because we'll obviously need to have a refreshed WESP at some point and not have the same WESP in 10 years' time. So we look forward to having more information about those decisions, or refreshed points. I'll leave it at that. Sorry, rambled on a bit.
Thanks, Marianne. As it was my question before I bring Jake in, I'm going to come back to you on a couple of things you said there. You gave us 3 reasons as to why there might not be transition happening, but I am quite concerned that at this stage in the document, you can't tell me why. Because it's quite fundamental to the suppositions and the assumptions on which this plan is based. And I'm concerned that you haven't got more detail on the failures of transition at this point, particularly bearing in mind this is something that when this came to us before consultation, when we didn't have the granular figures, both of us were issuing this as an area of concern. So I'm very concerned that we don't have more answers today in respect of that. I am mindful of the fact that you were saying these have been through Cabinet and you're putting them there, but they are out for engagement. And I do worry very, very seriously, bearing in mind that the growth in the Welsh language is in the north of the Calon Cymru catchment, that by committing in a strategic document to a particular direction, that we may be boxing ourselves into a corner in respect of interactions with the Welsh Government if the engagement exercise we're currently involved in and further investigation into why the transition isn't occurring at Trefollen. And of course, we only have 1 year's worth of information here, so we can't understand whether this is just a one-off or whether this is an ongoing pattern of transition issues. Very, very worried about us committing to a particular named site in such an important strategic document that the Welsh Government may then come back to us saying, you said this, why haven't you delivered on it, when actually consultation and evidence shows that it's not the best way forward. And I'm also concerned, and this is from a local member rather than a scrutiny perspective, I'm also seeing pushback in the local community that why are we bothering consulting when this is a done deal, because the strategic document says it's happening. So I'm concerned about the impact on the community in terms of buy-in to whatever decision is put on that area, particularly in the light of the audit report last week. So it's something I would consider, and Lynette, I think you want to come back in, and then I'll bring Jake in.
Yeah, it was more about what you said that at the start, Chair, in terms of, the reasons that people are, that there is this drop-off rate. And I think it's really clear that we have to improve the secondary provision, and that's the issue that we're trying to address here, is that we have got inequity of provision across the whole of Powys, and where we haven't got a broad enough offer, that is something that we have to address. It was identified as again by Estyn. It is something that's really clear to us in our transforming education strategy, our 10-year vision, that is obviously as this is the document behind this as well, our Welsh Education Strategic Plan. But we don't have the secondary provision yet that we really aspire to here in Powys, and want to be at a place where we have got that. I know we talked about pathways and stages, etc., and taking on board the point that Angela made earlier about working with parents, but we need to be able to have that provision there so that they do have that choice going forward. So I think that, well, we know that is the case, that why people have to change at this point from Welsh medium to English medium is because the offer in secondary is not yet at the place it should be to offer that clear pathway of a broad and balanced curriculum through Welsh medium in secondary across Powys.
Thanks, Lynette. Marianne? Just
to add to that, yeah, it's equity, isn't it? And if you look at the overall Ysgol Calon Cymru area, look at that, the choice, as I said earlier, something needs to happen, and this, to address this issue. And at the moment, this is the plan. This is what we're testing out there. And you mentioned latent demand previously in another comment. And it is understanding that latent demand on a local basis, wherever you are. So if we're going to be developing in Prestine or Crickhowell or wherever, we need to have those conversations. And I think that is as good a starting point as any. The fact that we've put our intention in a strategic plan, I think Welsh Government would be expecting us to outline what are our secondary plans. And if we didn't really put those plans in, then there would be questions asked. And I think that comes back to Lynette's point around Estyn as well.
I agree, Marianne. It really is a chicken and egg situation. And I leaving scrutiny aside for a minute, I have a significant concern that there isn't the number of pupils there at the moment to sustain a Welsh medium high school in the catchment, and that we need to be focusing more on the primary provision to bring those numbers through. But that needs testing in the community and looking at in more detail. Emma.
Yeah, Chair, just on the point, I know we'll have a different opportunity to do the full scrutiny around Calon Cymru, because we're only at informal engagement perspective at the moment. But you are right about the numbers, and we're well aware of that in respective officers. But and this has been part of the challenge and that we've had, and the complexity around the ask of creating. But then the other side of the coin is, even though the numbers are low, does that mean you shouldn't do it? And actually, do we need to start with small numbers and create the opportunities and have the quality full offer of curriculum that actually will then hopefully increase the numbers? It's that chicken and egg scenario that you just referred to. It's so complex.
I understand the challenge completely, Emma, but what I would say is we've seen schools start small and grow in Swansea and Cardiff, but they're drawing on 4 or 5 English medium catchments. This is basically drawing on one catchment, so it really would be Welsh medium increases, English medium drops. There's not much more to pull from, and I worry that parents are going to look at the offerings from the outset and go to the English medium school and be left with nothing in the Welsh. It's a discussion. It's a discussion for another day in detail, but that's the concern that I think we need to look at in terms of the strategic document and committing ourselves as an authority to that specific site and specific aim. Whilst it looks good on paper, I worry about the law of unintended consequences.
We've got to understand unintended consequences, because we've got to mitigate risk of a way that that's what we've got to do collectively. The other additional challenge we've got obviously is the size of Powys and the geography. So that has always got to play a part, and we might just need to accept in terms of the numbers that actually we shouldn't disadvantage anybody by not giving them the opportunity. And I think it does link back to the promotion, the curriculum element that's been referred to. We've heard that a lot today. I've been making notes as we've worked through this afternoon for us to take some actions away with us. But we mustn't forget that from a strategic perspective, it's the government's intent. The government has stipulated in terms of their aspiration and the increase of provision. We've also got aspirations within that. And so I think what we've just got to do is find out a managed way through, and this will evolve, and we'll work with the areas that we can and need to, but we've got to try and ensure that we don't disadvantage. I'll leave it there, Chair.
Entirely. Councillor Jake, I'm rather taken over your question. Do you want to come back on this, and then I'll bring Marianne and Bryn in?
I think there's still some room. I mean, I take exactly what Lynette says. I admire the ambition, but Marianne was very clear that this is the plan, is what she said, and it's been adopted by Cabinet to take forward. My challenge, and I'm sure the Welsh Government will be saying this, having this challenge too, is where is the evidence for developing this plan as opposed to another plan? I could give you a plan now which would be different to that one without any evidence, and it would be apparently just as strong as your plan, which has no evidence that you've been able to give us. So that is the problem that I have with putting something into a document that is unevidenced. Any plans that we have should be robustly supported with evidence, and it doesn't appear, you describe a number of arguments potentially for the loss of transition, but actually it doesn't say you've been to parents and actually asked, and here's the evidence. We don't know how far people would be prepared to go to travel. Will all the provision that's currently in Dolai and Lambista and to the north of the area be lost? Would there be a lower transition rate than even the 14% if we're forcing them to go to Bilth? Would not a provision in Llandrindod capture people better and use the Bilth site for something else? I don't know, I could make anything up as we go along, and it just feels to me that whether it was a Cabinet idea or an officer idea approved by Cabinet, it's unevidenced, which makes it unsound. And whilst we're fulfilling the Welsh Government's ambitions, frankly, if they don't challenge you as the way that I have, they wouldn't be doing their job. So I really do question the lack of evidence behind the plan going forward, and I think you need to be prepared for some challenge. I really think it needs some further thought.
Marianne, you've been looking to come in, I think, every third word for there.
That's fine, Councillor Jake as well. We're looking. You talk at the moment about having the evidence. I think what we're saying is we're doing the early engagement piece in order to develop our thinking, shape our thinking, and bring that evidence to the table. There's lots more work to be done. In terms of the next stage, there will be focus groups. So in our questionnaire, we've asked for interested parents who want to be part of focus groups. So we'll be engaging with parents, we'll be engaging with staff, and also with pupils. So there'll be pupil engagement sessions as part of this as well. So it's an ongoing dialogue that will take some time to get through to the end result. I lost my train now. I'll come back if I remember what else. But we're in this period now, and it would be unfair to sort of comment any further, as we haven't even finished the first piece of the engagement yet.
Yeah, I think, Marianne, you might have made Jake's point there, because his point is that we are in engagement and we don't know what the outcome is, and therefore what I think he is asking, what definitely I am thinking, is that the certainty that is coming across in the West as what we will do within this particular catchment, as opposed to your comments there. There is a dichotomy there that I don't think we have teased out, and I would suggest to you, based on this discussion, that the evidence base to say we will develop a Welsh medium high school at Bilth is not fully formed, and therefore it is not necessarily safe to put that in a document that is going to the Welsh Government as our strategic ambition for Welsh medium education within the Central Powys Belt.
Can I just come back on that and then?
By all means, I'm trying to get some clarity here, that just so that we've got the understanding.
We put in the documents, and I think in terms of Ysgol Calon Cymru, we do say it's all subject to statutory school reorganisation process. So the Welsh Government would understand that means that there needs to be full consultation. And as you know, full consultation is full consultation, and then decisions are either taken or they're not taken. So so there we go. So I think we're clear enough in there to satisfy Welsh Government's requirements. But obviously, we'll have the conversation with Welsh Government.
Okay, thanks for that, Marion. Let's leave that discussion there. Otherwise, we won't get on to other business. Bryn, you've been sitting there patiently whilst we look at mid-Powys issues. Do you want to come in now?
Iawn, diolch yn iawn. Slicwn bach o eglurhad ar be di ystyr darpariaeth cyfartal equity of provision sy'n cael ei sôn amdano fo beth o beunydd. Os ni'n dweud, mae be dyn ni'n chwilio amdano ydy deilliannau cyfartal i bawb a dwyieithrwydd i bawb sydd yn, dyna dyle fo y nod i fod, ac gyda hynny mewn golwg, mae angen rhoi gwynt teg tu ôl i addysg ddwyieithog a'i gyllido fo yn hael oherwydd yn hanesyddol mae'r cyllideb wrth gwrs i gyd wedi bod i addysg gyfrwng Saesneg. A hefyd, mae'n bosib cael darpariaeth cyfartal falle ar lefel cynradd mewn 13 o ddalgylchoedd, ond mae'n amhosib cael darpariaeth o cyfartal uwchradd, ond i bai bod yna ysgol ddwyieithog llawn yn pob uwchradd, yn pob un o'r 13 ddalgylch, ac ysgol Saesneg cyfan yn pob un o'r dalgylchoedd. A'r camgymeriad, os nad ydy hygyrchedd yr ysgolion yn gyfartal, dydy'r darpariaeth ddim yn mynd i orffen fan hyn gyfartal. A dyna sydd yn gwneud y cynlluniau i cynnal yr 13 o safleoedd Victorianaidd yma yn gamgymeriad sylfaenol. Mae'n amlwg o'r ystadegau, mae yna ddigon o blant yn algylch ddwyrain Maldwyn i gynnal ysgol uwchradd cychwynnol yn barod, a bod yna le a mae eisiau 2 ysgol lawr Fancw a 2 ysgol, un dwyieithog ac un Saesneg dros dro yn y gogledd ddwyrain hefyd. Fel mae hi, a mae'r cynlluniau fel maen nhw'n mynd yn ei blaenau, yr unig ffordd allith plant o gogledd y sir cael addysg ddwyieithog llawn ydy trwy 80% ohonyn nhw teithio heibio i ysgol lleol. Lle mae'r darpariaeth cyfartal yn y sefyllfa yna?
Yeah, thanks for that, Brendan. Whilst you're waiting for people to come in, it is worth reflecting that the proposed Bill school would have exactly the same number of high school pupils in it as a school established based on transition just from Davis Lloyd over 5 years. So if that's sustainable in Bill, Bryn has the fair point. Why is that not sustainable in the Newtown Welshpool catchment?
Newtown Llanidloes, really.
I was looking at the wide of Severn Valley, but yes.
Yeah, well, yeah, Welshpool can go either way, really.
Can I come in on 2 points? If that's okay.
Yeah, by all means.
First of all, the point that I wanted to make earlier, and I forgot my train of thought, was in relation to Councillor Jake's comments. And we've clearly said going back to the Ysgol Calon Cymru engagement piece, there would be no impact on the stream in Rhaeadr or the stream in Trefonen, just to make that perfectly clear. Our plans wouldn't, though if those streams were removed and centralised in Builth, we are going against our own strategy, which is to make sure that improve access to Welsh medium provision. So by removing it, it doesn't make sense. So just to put that out there, because I think there is some information, etc., around that. So the second one was around Welsh medium in the north, secondary provision. Councillor Bryn, our plan's clear there as well in terms of the new all through in Cerenion is where we believe that Welsh medium provision will be developed. And I think, and Delyth said it earlier, the team have worked very closely with the temporary governing bodies to develop a strong vision for Welsh medium provision there. Again, I don't know how to say this, any changes that require statutory changes, we would have to take that forward as a school reorganisation process. So just to put that out there as well.
Yeah, thanks for that, Marion. Please come back, Brian.
Yeah. And okay, if you brought up this Llanfair Cerenion School, and you know, I hope they succeed in everything they do, but every child from Llangynog, Penabon Val, Llansilin is going to pass an excellent school to get to Llanfair, and similarly from Llangurig and Llanidloes, they will pass excellent other local schools to get there. It's not equity provision, it's making access to a fully bilingual, the only fully bilingual high school in Eastern Powys will be more difficult to access for 80% of the children than the local school. It could be so different. It could be so different if people are not so wedded to these sites generated in the Victorian era. I hope before we start trying to draw hundreds of millions of pounds down from Welsh Government to build new sites, that the locations of these schools are that we do try and start with a clean slate and not. It is impossible for Welsh medium education to develop as rapidly as it needs to do in North Powys with one central site. I mean, Ysgol Bro Hyddgen has been established now. It'll take till 2036 at current rates to become a fully bilingual school. We're talking, we won't even have another fully bilingual school in North Powys until 2050, let alone help contribute to the million speakers of the Welsh Government. It's a fundamental mistake, and it has to be rectified as soon as possible. Otherwise, you're all going to have people like me grumbling forever about this, because it's holding back Welsh medium education, where we were once a Welsh-speaking bilingual society.
Thank you for that, Bryn. Whilst you've been talking, Emma's communicated to me with the question. Within this discussion, we talked about specifics and we've talked about generalities, and has posed the question, what if we were to put 3 Welsh medium all-age schools but don't say where they are? I think that is a little bit of a fudge. It doesn't move things forward very rapidly. But one thing that has come across to me during this discussion is that the evidence base for the proposals that are coming forward at the moment is not as solid as I would be comfortable in seeing it. And I'm minded very much going back to our meeting on Friday, where we were looking at the audit report on what went wrong in relation to the creation in 2016-17 of Ysgol Calon Cymru. And one of the issues there was that the evidence base for the merger wasn't strong enough as well. I'm not in any way suggesting these proposals are in that position. But I am wondering whether Emma's suggestion that there needs to be a little bit of a fudge at this point, but perhaps with a time-given commitment to draw the evidence base forward, so that very early in the West decisions are taken, may be a better way forward, which wouldn't in and of itself be seen to conflict with any schools reorganisation issues by leaving open the accusation that the authority has predetermined those consultations by making a statement in a statutory document. I'm going to leave that there. I don't know what the thoughts of the rest of the meeting are, because in this area there's basically been 4 or 5 of us contributing and a lot of other people have been silent. So rather than prolonging the discussion, if members can give an indication of their feelings in the chat, and then I will share the responses to the meeting and the public as a way forward. And if that's the case, we can put it forward as a recommendation. Does that answer your question, Emma? And Lynette, Marianne, does that sound a sensible recommendation for us to put to Cabinet? Emma?
Yes, Chair. As we move forward with any proposal, there would be detailed business cases, and so therefore that would contain the evidence that you're seeking. So I think if we move forward on the basis of a commitment to developing a number of all-age Welsh medium schools, that should be sufficient, and then the business cases will give the evidence that's required when we bring particular proposals forward.
Thanks for that. I think that is a more positive position to take, because I would hate for us to create a Welsh medium school in an area where it's not sustainable and deny another area where it is sustainable the ability to have a Welsh medium school because we cited one somewhere else. Thank you for that. I'm taking track of where we are because I know we've got other business. I think we've covered off objective 3 in some detail in terms of the transition issues and the problems that raises and the questions that raise. I think we've touched on outcome 4, and I think that comes out of the questions that we've raised in 3. But I would like us to explore a little bit by way of statements from you as to actually how much confidence you have that eSchool is the way forward in terms of expanding the Welsh language provision in some of those smaller Welsh language units. I'm looking at the figures, Brecon 1 subject, Llanidloes 8, Callum Cymru 7, but Brohusgin a full suite of 22. How much uptake is eSchool starting to have in those smaller schools in terms of being able to expand the provision, and how do you see that developing into the future? Because I'm not seeing any specific targets for eSchool driven expansion of provision in those schools, and that might be helpful. Go ahead, Anne.
David. Thank you, Chair. Regarding eSchool, I think now, because we've just passed the post-16 strategy, things are looking quite differently to how we were when we were planning post-16 provision previously. And one of the key elements as part of the post-16 strategy is the entitlement definition, where we've stated clearly that as far as possible, we will ensure equity in provision for Welsh medium and English medium provision. So we are looking now, as we're planning for September 22, we are looking at doing our best. We know it won't be possible to be fully equitable between both languages, but we are looking at where the strength of provision is, where the quality of provision as well, and opening up the options so we're not duplicating, I'm making this up, but 6 day RDS across the county, but perhaps 3 day RDS, which is geography, and then building additional subjects through the medium of Welsh. And we're very aware there's a lack at the moment of vocational subjects in Welsh. We're very driven for the academic subjects, the histories, the geographies, the mathematics, etc., the maths, and the Cymraeg Mamiaith, which I'll come back to Bryn's question after. But what we're looking now at the non-academic or the vocational subjects, such as Camwth Gam, which is the Welsh medium childcare provision, which will be a BTEC, but also looking at provisions such as, for example, amaethyddiaeth, agriculture through the medium of Welsh, business as well through the medium of Welsh, which will broaden our offer for pupils. So that we're currently finalising that offer, and Ysgol Brohydgen, Ysgol Caerenion, Ysgol Llanidloes, Calon Cymru, and Brecon and Llanbyllion have been working together to try and identify where their strength of provision is and where they can sort of broaden our offer. I also need to emphasise as well, we do actually currently liaise with other counties across Wales, and we are having provision from Bala and other schools in Wrexham and South Wales as well, which also will be available for our post-16 pupils as well. So I'm afraid, Councillor Pete, I don't have actual numbers because the offer is being developed as we currently speak, but it will be something we'll be able to share later.
Thank you for that, Anwen. You touched a huge amount there on post-16, but I'm more interested in Key Stage 4.
Diolch, Galon, sorry I misunderstood that. At the moment, very little has been developed. It's still being, the Key Stage 4 provision is still being looked at, if you want, individually by individual schools, but it is something we hopefully in the future can expand on. You're right, at the moment there's very little Key Stage 4 provision.
Thank you for that, Anwen. Again, I would like to see some smarter targets there. You're not outlining what the target is in terms of expanding in these areas, which makes it really difficult for us to assess 2, 3, 4, 5 years on how much progress we are making. It is something that I think it's going to be the one overarching comment I make to Cabinet tomorrow, is that the lack of targets make it very difficult for us to measure the success of the proposal as we go forward, so that we have advance warning of where there's deviation from it, rather than getting 5 years down the line and find we haven't made progress. So that would be an ongoing observation. Sorry, there's lots of good narrative, but not many figures, and I like figures, not narrative.
Diolch. Take that on board. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you for that. Does anyone else have any comments around the provision, subject provision? Bryn, did Arwen, because I was distracted by the chat, did Arwen respond to your comments about?
No, I didn't.
Well,
do you want me to do that?
Yeah, please do.
No.
So mi air Gymraeg, I will turn to Welsh. So Siôn, os ti'n barod. Diolch I ti, Cynghorydd Bryn, am dy gwestiwn di o ran darpariaeth ac disgyblion yn cymryd fyny mamiaeth Cymraeg fel pwnc lefel A. Yn wir, os ni wrth y modd, os ni'n gallu deud ti yn blwmp ac yn blaen, bod yna mwy a mwy o ddisgyblion yn dewis Cymraeg mamiaeth. Ond mae hyn yn broblem ledled Cymru. Ond fodd bynnag, dydy o ddim yn golygu nad ydyn ni yn gweithio arno fo. A fel rhan o strategaeth heb ost, be dyn ni'n edrych arno fo wrth gwrs ydy yn gyntaf sicrhau bod y darpariaeth sydd ar gael yn un cryf, ond yn allweddol hefyd ar ben hynny ydy y darpariaeth allgyrsiol, fel bod y disgyblion yn gweld gwerth y Gymraeg fel pwnc, bod nhw'n cael y cyfleoedd i fentro yn y Gymraeg tu allan o'r ysgol, so dio ddim just yn pwnc ysgol, bod nhw'n cyfleoedd dramau, a gwahanol adloniant fel y music Cymraeg ac y blaen. Mae hwnna'n allweddol, bod nhw ddim yn just gweld o fel pwnc ysgol yn unig. Ac yn fwy pwysig os rhywbeth ydy bod ni yn marchnata fwy y gwefth o ddilyn cawsiau fel mamiaeth Cymraeg ar gyfer cyfleoedd i'w dyfodol. Dydy o dim ond os ydych chi eisiau bod athro neu athrawes Gymraeg. Os ydych chi'n edrych ar unrhyw swyddi ledled Cymru heddiw, mi welwch chi yn blwmp ac yn blaen bod nhw'n edrych am siaradwyr rhugl yn y Gymraeg, yn ysgrifenedig ac ar lafar, ac mae eisiau ni hysbysebu am marchnata hynny, bod Cymraeg yn union fel Saesneg yn pwnc gwefth ei astudio ac agor drysau. So rhyw ffordd neu gilydd, dyna lle dyn ni ar ledled Cymru yn mynd i ofod wneud, achos dydw i'n gwybod dydw o ddim yn broblem yn unig ym Mhywys, mae'n broblem ledled Cymru. Ond dwi ddim wedi ateb dy gwestiwn di, ond dwi'n yn cytuno gyda ti ac fel ti yn gweld y angen i ehangu'r darpariaeth. A mi wnawn ni ein gorau gles.
Iawn, diolch yn iawn. Mae'n gynsyrn arw bod yna cynlliad yn dewis pwnc lefel A, achos da ni'n mynd i gael, mae rhaid ni gael mwy. Diolch.
Ond mae eisiau ni farchnata y manteision ohono fan does. Dyna lle da ni'n angen mynd. Diolch y galon.
Thank you very much for that. I think people that are observant will notice I haven't done much on outcomes 5 and 6 at this point, which deals with Siarter Iaith and more wider opportunities and additional learning needs in the medium Welsh. That is deliberate because there actually aren't any changes in those two sections from what was put forward prior to consultation. So I'm going to look back on our discussion then when we did touch on ALN quite significantly and take forward any observations we made then, which aren't addressed if there are any, and take that forward to Cabinet. The one thing I would observe though is that the ALN side is also short on measurable targets. There are ambitions to meet all of the legal responsibilities, but that possibly again in the final stages with Welsh Government, you might like to look at some smart objectives coming out of those so that it's measurable going into the future. Siarter Iaith is full of a lot more data. That section's got a lot more data and a lot more ambitions within it. So unless anyone has any comments on those, please put your hands up now. I have nothing. We've talked about increasing the number of teachers, which just brings us onto a final summary. Does anyone have any final comments before we draw this section of scrutiny to a close? In page, I'm seeing in the chat, Sandra, I'm not picking up on what you put in there.
Sorry, Mr. Chair, it's page 36, not 38.
Okay, that's why I can't find it.
Apologies.
Does anyone want to come back on that comment? It's
Anwen has already put it in. Thank you, Anwen. Diolch yn fawr.
Okay, it's 139 over 1149. Sorry, 1141. For those that don't have access to the chat. I haven't had any further indications within the chat around the comments on 3 across the county rather than 3 specific, other than a couple of additional observations in support. So I will take that forward as a recommendation to Cabinet tomorrow. And Lynette, as Emma is no longer with us for some reason. I know she was having technical problems earlier. I hope that's helpful guidance to you, and that you are not too concerned that we are, some might say, diluting the commitments, but actually I think we're giving you a position where you can actually get the commitment to have 3 schools actually in the right place where they're sustainable, rather than committing to 3 things now that may actually be set up in a way that they don't succeed in the way that everyone in this room wants them to.
Yes, Chair, as suggested as well by Emma, they're more than happy to take that as a recommendation from the scrutiny, for you to take that recommendation from scrutiny to Cabinet tomorrow. Yeah, thank you.
Thanks very much for that. And thank you to all officers here for that section. I said I wanted to do it in 2 hours. When we knock out the time that we started and the formalities, we came in on about 2 hours, 7 minutes. So that's not too bad for what is one of the most important documents that we probably have looked at in the last 18 months in terms of the strategic position and development of the authority as we go forward over the next 2 council terms. So thank you, everyone. If there are officers that were only here for that section and not for the COVID section, by all means, please have a good evening, and don't feel obliged to sit in with us for the rest of the time unless you're interested. I won't be offended if you say goodbye, and goodbye, Marianne, and thank you.
Thank you.
So I will turn us now to the 2 papers on COVID. They do cover very similar areas. One is an inward-looking document, looking at the lessons that we have learned and want to take forward. And when we finish that section, I actually do have a recommendation coming back from scrutiny just on what you put in front of us, and one from Estin in terms of their view of us. So, Lynette, I'm not sure who is leading. I'm going to make the assumption it's you. Would you like to introduce both of them together, and we'll take the 2 together rather than being in a position where we're repeating ourselves?
Certainly, Chair. The reports today that we're looking at in terms of the internal document, and I think the external document from Estin endorses it, is our response to COVID and the lessons that we've learned. The report that you've got there goes through a number of the issues that we had to address, the emergency childcare hubs, and we looked at, some of the lessons learned there in terms of collaborative working, flexibility being key, and looking at the second time that we went into hubs, there actually going to their own schools rather than the 13 areas that we have. In terms of health and safety, that's on the report as well. Collaborative work comes up there as a key issue again. The task and finish group, which has been essential for all the work we've done and the way that different services have worked together with unions. And what's come out of that is new ways of working. These are themes that when we come to the end that are coming out from all of the aspects of the work that we undertook. In terms of digital, once again in the report, you've got collaborative working. It's clear that there was no one way of undertaking the digital learning. There were different ways, and be it live lessons, be it pre-recorded. We learned from that actually there's no one right way. It's actually dependent on the needs at the time. We learned about the digital connections, etc., and all of that. In terms of blended learning, the connectivity, the engagement, supporting parents, and again, no one way of blending learning. It depends on what the needs are at the school. And in terms of that as well, the impact of the new ways of working, and that's a common theme throughout all of the aspects of the work that we undertook. In terms of the check-in, which is later in the report, again, collaboration, consultation, and us working together. And again, in the report that you've got from Estin there today, you can see that way of working, and indeed going for the 4 weeks that we did in the summer and having that 2-week half term, that's endorsed by the Estin report as well. In terms of well-being, clearly identified lessons learned is a key priority, and I think will be a key priority going forward. The team around the hub that then became the team around the cluster, that's a lesson that we've learned and how effective it's been at delivering things together. That supporting our vulnerable learners has been our highest priority. And again, the team around the cluster has been effective in that support. So really, with the report from Estin and this report before you today, there are some key themes that we've learned in this COVID pandemic about how we work with our schools. One key theme was around leadership being key, communicating effectively being key, collaboration comes through loud and clear in all of the aspects of work. Digital working and the difference that that has made to throughout the pandemic with our work with schools, and not just that, but the new ways of working that we have going forward. So the way that we've been able to engage with schools has been, has seen a positive impact in the work we've done. If you take it back to pre-pandemic, we were lucky and fortunate if we met our head teachers once a year all together, and we know how much, in the consultation for the transformation vision document, we were all in the one place in the pavilion there, but that was usually once a year we'd have those kind of events. We've been meeting head teachers, chairs of governors, etc. on a regular basis, and that has been a lesson we've learned about that collaborative working together, often communicating effectively, so that we've been able to deliver things, I believe, flexibly and at pace moving forward. So that's just my introduction, Councillor People. There are officers on the call with us today who lead in those certain areas if there are specific questions around any of the areas within the report.
Thank you very much, Lynette. I've not seen any hands yet, so I'm going to respond to that and hopefully give people a chance to come in with some questions, and I'll open up with a couple of my own. I was really, really pleased to see this report. I know from the interactions that you've had in terms of bringing stuff back to scrutiny at varying stages during the pandemic to get assurance from us and to learn lessons that everything looked good within as much as it could be. So it's really pleasing to see Estin recognise how swiftly we moved and embraced digital and how much progress we've made in respect of that. It's a really solid response in terms of the wider schools community and how it has changed the way that they are working. And I'm really pleased to see the comments that this has moved on post-COVID, and that these interactions and these partnerships are being moved and transitioned into business as usual, which bodes very well for the development and delivery of the new curriculum, because there is now quite clearly much more cluster-based working, and they are almost a virtual school rather than just individual schools, which bodes very well for the future as well. My first question, and I now see two other hands, so I'll bring them in as well. You identified during this process that there were pupils that were digitally disadvantaged. Well, those pupils are digitally disadvantaged today outside of the pandemic, in that they don't have access to the internet and that type of media. So they are disadvantaged relative to their cohort. Are you maintaining a log of those so that if we're in a similar position again, that we can respond to them quickly? And more to the point, what are we doing to support those pupils today to make sure that they aren't missing out simply because, for whatever reason, they don't have access to the internet at home? And I think Eirik is going to respond to that because his camera's come on.
Sorry, can I speak? Yes, that's right. I was going to respond to it. Yeah, there was, we provided a lot of resources for pupils during that time. So out of 880 odd families, I think we provided over 1,300 devices out to those families at that time. There were some that found it very difficult to have connectivity. Even though we provided MiFi devices, there were some that were unable to do that. Schools then adjusted how they supported these pupils. Some of them considered them as vulnerable learners, so it allowed them to access the childcare hubs in their schools, which allowed them to come in and have some of the resources that others would have they'd have benefited from if they had been at home. Others allowed them to come into the school to download work so that they gained the same experiences then as others, also working from home, but not necessarily online. They were able to do it that way. In response to what are we doing with them now, schools continue to have those updated lists of those pupils that have digital connectivity issues. So if they do respond and have to go to blended learning or distance learning, they would know which of those pupils would need to access either from school or to have another format for their work to be provided. So all schools keep that updated regularly, because we know that it is possible that from a day-to-day, those pupils may need to have to isolate because of COVID, so the schools need to have that at their fingertips.
Thanks for that, Ira. I'm interested in business as usual as well, though. These pupils are digitally disadvantaged, irrespective of the cause of it, whether it's no broadband or whether it's financial problems in the family. Are we monitoring their performance, and are we being aware of that as a potential reason for them not moving forward educationally? Basically, I guess I'm saying, is this a new indicator that we should be monitoring as a cohort of pupils who are at risk of not performing as well educationally as their cohorts because for whatever reason they are digitally disadvantaged?
I see what you're saying there, but all schools will be tracking their pupils' performance. So I wouldn't have said that that schools would be ensuring that every pupil is able to access the learning outside of school, whether it's digitally or whether it's online or whether it's through work and physical work at that as well. So I would imagine that schools are making those adjustments to that to ensure that all pupils are not disadvantaged, whether it's digitally or not.
Okay, that's a degree of reassurance. I'm maybe not for this meeting, but for something for you to think about. Maybe this is a new cohort that we should be monitoring longer term to see whether that is a potential area that leads to pupils not performing to their best ability. I don't know whether it does or not. I'm putting it forward to you as it was an area during the pandemic that we had concerns about. Should we be having concerns about that cohort of pupils in the normal day-to-day run-of-the-mill? I'm not expecting an answer from you. It's a question for you to take away.
I'm happy to answer where we are at the moment, if you wish. You know, we do ask when we've been into the schools about those that did not engage in learning during that time, but also those that found it difficult to access learning. Now, those that were actually able to return either to the childcare hubs or to be engaged in their learning actually have progressed well. And most of those are now returning to where we would expect them to be at that point. Now, that's what we've got back from our schools. Those that disengaged in their learning, and that's not necessarily due to them being digitally disadvantaged, it could be down to other factors as well. Those are the ones now that really have, found it more difficult to re-engage in their learning as they've returned to schools. And those are the ones that the schools now are using their accelerated learning grant from Welsh Government to target interventions to help those now to progress to where they should be in their learning. But yeah.
Thanks for that. That is really helpful. I'm going to pass on to Margaret, who's got another question for you.
Yeah, thank you. First of all, what a pleasing report to read, and all the staff involved who work so hard must be congratulated on the report. But going on from that, looking at the training that took place, which has supported children with mental health and well-being, what monitoring has happened of that training? And because it must presumably slightly different from previous training that was available, and will it be carried forward? Is it something that's going to be adopted? Have we learned something during this about that, and is it, you know, going to be a valuable learning experience to continue with? And those linked to what Peter said, again, anecdotally, I'm hearing from people that obviously some children more affected by what's happened during this period than others. And there's still children are affected, and there still are issues with some children. So it's the monitoring of that, and how that again may be impacting on children's progress as they go forward in their educational life.
I think that's Eirig or Hayley. Hayley's come on, so I'm going with Hayley.
Thank you, Chair. Thank you very much, Diolch yn fawr. I'll talk firstly about training, how training is different and how that will change for the future. I think it's important to note that training has changed because of the needs of well-being. Training has changed. We have looked differently at the way we're doing things, but also it has come at a time where health and well-being is central to the curriculum for Wales. And also, Welsh Government has released its new whole school approach to emotional health and well-being for schools. So I think it was going to change anyway, and our focus on it was going to change anyway. But of course, with the COVID pandemic, we've had to respond, and we've had to respond quickly. And I believe we've responded very well. And certainly that was borne out by our visit by Estyn, by the thematic report too. So one of the key aspects, I'll give you a couple of anecdotal examples, because obviously I appreciate that we don't have time to go into this in depth. In the report, there is a list of the sorts of training that we're offering. that does not stay as a one-off. Our approach to trauma-informed approaches, as identified by Trauma Informed Schools UK, that is approach we sit firmly with in the local authority. It was already fairly well established across various services, but not in every school. And we have a commitment to making sure that that is rolled out to every school in Powys, and that is topped up. And alongside that, we're also making sure that we're using grant money effectively to ensure a system of supervision. Supervision in this term is supervision the way you'd have it as a psychologist and as an educational welfare officer, as a safeguarding lead. Supervision is about spending time with those that work with you, listening to them and supporting them through some of the very difficult stories that they have to listen to when they are in schools and settings. And so that's two really big areas that are now permanent fixtures within Powys. So hopefully that helps to answer some of that training. There's of course far more than that. You know, emotional health training, ELSA training, there's a plethora and a range of training, but it is about making sure that each school focuses on its particular needs within its school and setting. And it's about our new wellbeing leads, Mary Strong and Christopher Davis, working with schools to make sure that they're focused on the right aspect of what they need for them. So it's bespoke to those schools. So I hope that's answered for you, Margaret, the questions on the training. In terms of evaluating, we've moved in the authority now to using the Kirkpatrick model of evaluation. And so we're getting a sense of what's working and what isn't working so well. So that's been really, really helpful, so that there is now a stronger system, I think, of evaluating the impact of the training that we are delivering, and also listening to what teachers tell us anecdotally and leaders about what's working well in their school. Trauma-informed schools comes out very strongly as being a system that works really well. So we will be sticking with it, and it's certainly something that Welsh Government is encouraging us to stick with too. And then finally, if I touch on briefly on the impact of pupils, yes, we've seen some changes anecdotally from listening to schools, but also from the data that we have that we use to monitor provision in schools. We can see that there is certainly an impact on behaviour. There is an impact on more negative behaviour. Pupils are demonstrating and presenting with greater needs, and we are having to respond to that as a local authority. And we're also having to perhaps bring forward some aspects of our strategy sooner than we might, for example, moving more quickly with our nurture programme pilots in response to the need. So I hope that is a summary of an answer to those questions. I'm happy to expand further. Thank you, Chair. Thank you.
Thanks very much, Heidi. Is there anything specific you wanted to come back on, Margaret?
No, I think that's fine at the moment, Pete. Thank you.
Thanks very much. Councillor Lucy.
Thank you, Chair. It's a great report and lots of really positive stuff in there. My only concern, I suppose, was I know that you've changed things as you've gone along, and you've improved things and built on things throughout the pandemic. But I guess I was expecting to see a little bit more in the lessons learned about this is how we might change things in the future if something similar happened again, or rather than this is what we have done, a bit more about this is what we would do differently. And maybe that's because you don't feel that there's anything more and you've got as far as you can. But I'd just be interested to hear your thoughts on that. Thank you.
Go ahead, Lynette.
Yeah, I'm happy to come back in on that. Thank you, Councillor Lucy. Yeah, I mean, when we've gone through the report, and we've gone through it as a team of senior officers in our SSMT to evaluate every aspect of the work over the pandemic. And actually, when we've evaluated it, even the Estin report that came in, evaluating our performance, there was very little about what we would do to change it. One of the things we did change, and that is in there as the lessons learned, is that we went in the first lockdown to 13 cluster hubs, etc. And we learned from that there were some children that weren't accessing the hubs because they didn't want to go to other schools. So when we reopened later on and had to go back into a hub position after the reopening, so it was this time last year, the hub provision was then at the child's own school, which was something we learned. So if we look back on it, really, the way that we responded, I think, was good, and that that in terms of lessons learned, what we have learned have been positive things, actually, rather than some of the negative things. Generally, I think it's worked well. We've had good collaboration. As I say, the things we've learned is collaboration works and is effective, and it's been improved through the pandemic. As I say, we've learned that, digital working, who'd have thought we'd be in this situation, is effective for communicating. So some of the lessons we've learned is the success lessons. And, I'm not saying there weren't any, barriers along the way, but we had challenges that we had to overcome. And I think that in all honesty and reflection of all of this, we did well, and actually there aren't any, many things that we would do differently if we were at the start of it all again. So I think because we collaborated well from the start and had everybody's working together, we've had head teachers, chairs of governors, unions, officers, elected members. We've tried to ensure that we've communicated all the way through and got everyone's views on things before making final decisions, really. So what I've learned, myself personally, is the way that when you work with and collaborate with the schools in particular, you know, you could together, everyone achieves more, very, you know, that kind of motto really, but that is a fact. And we have really as a team looked at it in fine detail as to would we do this differently if we were doing it again? There may be some aspects, but certainly in general, I think, you know, from Eston's endorsement as well, as a service area, we did well. And I think I would like to say at this point that we wouldn't have done it so well without other services within the local authority supporting us, because a lot of this report from Eston is not just down to the school service, but the youth service comes in there, but also the housing come in there. But we, you know, we relied on the transport section, we relied on the catering and cleaning. So really it's and it just goes to show as well, when you're working across service areas effectively, what a local authority can do.
Thanks, Lynette. Yeah, it was very impressive, and thank you all for all the hard work that you put in, and that's really encouraging to hear your response there. Thank you.
Eirik, I think you're wanting to respond to that as well before I bring Councillor Sandra in.
Yeah, just quickly, just to say, Councillor Lucy, every time we seem to go into the next phase of the pandemic, we're having to adjust how and what we do. If you see what I mean. The first time, you know, all schools closed down, so we had to go to the hubs, and then we started to reopen, and we had that phase where reopening schools, and we had to have childcare hubs then in some of the leisure centres, even down to last term, where, you know, we had some pupils out, others in schools, so you're providing more of blended learning. We've had to adapt all the way through this pandemic to the guidelines are from Welsh Government, and how schools are able to adapt to this as well. The one thing that we've learned through this is that our strength has been the work that we've done with our schools. They have been so supportive of the work that we've done, and we've worked in unison with them. And I think that out of everything that we've learned going forward is something that's so important. Whenever we have an issue or a problem now, we know that we can turn to them and talk to them, and that we can actually get through that problem. So even taking out COVID out of the situation, going forward in terms of how we work, those relationships are so strong, but also ones now where we know we can go and talk honestly to them, and we will get honest answers back as well. So that's definitely something that's a strength now from Powys.
Thank you, Eirik.
Thanks, Eirik. Nothing else, Lucy?
No, thank you, Pete.
Okay, thanks for that. Councillor Sandra.
Thank you, Chair. I too would like to relay my appreciation to everyone, and I really do mean everyone, because it has been a collective approach to all of this to produce this report, which is a true reflection of how everyone's pulled together to get us through this terrible time of the pandemic, and supporting the children through their education for the last 2 years. And I know staff have gone the extra mile, and under the crazy times that we've had behind us. Would have thought that we'd be walking around into banks even with a mask on. You know, they would have arrested us years ago. Now everybody does it, and we're all laughing as we're going in. Anyway, that aside, my concern is with regarding so much has changed, and the dependency that we've had on technology, how much it has improved, and what they say, Mother, about invention, and you know how people rely on that to improve and create new ways of working, and there have been improvements. But with the changes that are about at the moment regarding the provision of IT, and schools being so dependent upon IT and making sure that that is working really well, I'd like to thank Eirik in some of the work that is going on at the moment in our area. I'm sorry for being parochial, but this is affecting all schools. Schools have had to turn to either Ceredigion or another provider for their IT service. I do hope that we get that right, and no schools will be left without that support, because I think it is so important and vital, and it's proved to be such a huge asset for everybody. Thank you.
Thanks, Sandra. Does anyone want to respond?
I'll just respond quickly, Dr. Bowers. Thank you very much, Councillor Sandra. Yeah, we are still working with all our schools to ensure that by the end of this term, they will all have a provider for their hardware service. Obviously, Powys will continue to support their Wi-Fi and the core duties, core statutory duties that they will provide. It is just about ensuring that they have a good supply and a good supplier for their IT. There's a lot of investment that has gone in over the course of the last 3 years to the education technology program, and what we need to ensure is that is built on now and developed further. We are now in a much better place in terms of the standard of equipment that's inside schools, but there is still investment needed, and we still need to build sustainability into this as well, so we do not return to the situation where we're having pupils with outdated equipment, especially as we come to the new curriculum, which digital skills is one of the 3 main skills, cross-curricular skills. We need to ensure we have good quality devices which pupils can use. And that's just one area of IT, isn't it? We can talk about the screens and monitors, digital TVs as well, that hopefully we will get investment in the future as well. But we need to ensure that all schools are supported going forward. So we'll keep working with our schools to ensure that happens.
Thanks, Eric. Lynette, you want to come in as well?
Sorry, Councillor, but it's not on digital. It's just up to make another comment. So
I saw your comment.
Sorry,
just as I was speaking. Sandra, do you want to come back on that?
Just to say thank you very much, and as I said, it's so crucial. We have to, we've made so many advances and improvements in the way that we work and use technology. We've become dependent on it now, and we can never go back to the way we were before. Communication has really improved, and it's great for Powys. So thank you very much. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you, Councillor Sandra. Lynette, I think it was you that said this, but I do have a comment on, or it might have been Eric, around pupil performance. One of you suggested that the majority of pupils are at the level we would expect them to be at. How confident are you in that? Are there any particular geographic areas that have caused particular problems? And for the benefit of any parents that may be seeing this who are worried about their own particular son or daughter, can you give us some assurance around how the catch-up money is being spent and how confident you are that pupils, let's say in 18 months' time, will be where we would have expected them to be in terms of their development and their academic ability had we not had the pandemic?
Councillor, I don't know whether I can give assurances as to where we'll be in 18 months, because we don't, until we get to work with the pupils, we don't know. It was me, and I said yes. Most pupils, schools were telling us that by the end of the summer term, that most pupils they felt were now re-engaged in their work, and they felt that they were making the progress. They'd done some internal assessments which they were able to share with us, especially the national testing. When we got to the autumn term, we actually have managed now as school improvement advisors to actually get into our schools. We've actually managed to see the work that pupils are producing. We've been able to see, again, further assessments which schools have been able to produce over that time, to talk to pupils and to talk to staff. And that is where our reassurance is coming, that we are actually returning for most of those pupils to where we would be expecting them to be. We had schools saying this was returning, but it was now able to actually get out and see some of this ourselves and to verify that alongside our schools, that has given us the confidence to say, yes, things are improving. In terms of the accelerated learning grant, which has come from Welsh Government, in each of our school improvement visits each term, we ask schools to show us how they've been using that funding and the impact that it's actually having on their pupils. So that's where we see that it is having a positive impact on some of those pupils that have been negatively impacted by the pandemic. What I would say is that even across the course of this time, we still find out that there are pupils who are negatively impacted on it. And sometimes in terms of what they've been learning. So you might go in, teach some mathematics, and all of a sudden find that those pupils there, that area which you thought they had, a good grasp of, suddenly they don't. And that sometimes relates back to some of the topics perhaps that they covered during that time that they were away from school doing the remote learning. So there are always going to be areas that you'll think that, oh, right, this will be, what we're saying is normal. Yes, it's not returning to normal. The standards are there, but there are still areas even within those that schools will find that need extra support and extra help. So it will take time to recover and for everyone to recover. But what we can say from the moment and the assurances we give is that because we're getting back into schools as well, it's not only schools that are saying that standards are returning to where they got for most of the pupils, but we're actually able to see that in the work as well that we've seen and the conversations that we've had with pupils as well.
Thanks very much, Ari. That's exceptionally reassuring. Lynette, I've got another question for you, but I'm going to ask you first, what is your something else? And let you come in with that. And then I've got a final question and a final observation.
Yeah, I just wanted to make the comment really that whilst dealing with a COVID pandemic as a service area, during that period we also made significant improvements in the recommendations from Eston during that period of time as well. Scrutiny was a big part of that. We continued with our, as well as business critical activities, we were dealing with business as usual and an improvement journey at the same time. Scrutiny, I don't think I think we carried on with scrutiny throughout the pandemic. So that side of things as well, we carried on as a service. And I think I just wanted to make that point as well, that whilst dealing with the pandemic, we also made significant improvements. If I take ALN as one example, during that period, Hayley was successful in being the senior service manager for ALN, and during this period of time when we've looked at ALN provision and in the WESP today, we didn't touch on it, but I just wanted to touch on it here really. We went from a place of ALN needed to be significantly improved to a place now where when Eston came in recently stating that the practice that they're seeing in Powys is to be shared across other local authorities, and this all happened during a COVID pandemic. So I just wanted to make that point, Chair, and I mean scrutiny was a major part of that in looking at all of our documents and all of our strategies, ensuring that everything that we were doing was thoroughly scrutinised as well through that COVID period. We didn't stop, is what I'm saying. Thanks, Chair.
Thanks, Lynette, and no thanks, because that was going to be a large part of my summary of this section. I will come back to it. One thing that you've touched on a little bit there, and that was PPE. And one thing that I've noticed, because not so much in scrutiny meetings, but in the more private meetings for group leaders and scrutiny chairs, you'll know I've been quite hawkish on ensuring safety of staff and safety of pupils. I know throughout this pandemic, the Welsh Government have been more cautious than the English Government, and Powys County Council have been more cautious than the Welsh Government. And that's shown through in the fact that we have had very few instances of classrooms, let alone schools, having to be closed. I think we've had one school closure and half a dozen year group closures throughout the entire time. Can you give us some assurance that as we come out of this wave, and I'm mindful that we have a variant of the Omicron variant that is causing quite significant problems in Scandinavian countries at the moment, that you will come out cautiously and put the well-being of our children, pupils and staff first, because I've been looking at figures today suggesting well over 100,000 pupils across the country have long COVID. I don't know what the figures are for Powys, and I don't know whether you do, but the long-term health and well-being of our pupils has to come first. And I would commend you personally and professionally for the approach that you have taken up until now.
Yeah, thank you, Chair. And yes, indeed, we have taken a cautious approach throughout the pandemic, as you rightly said there. As we're coming out of the pandemic, just to say, we made significant plans over the Christmas period for the return to school. We worked tirelessly again with the head teachers, with the teaching unions, the teaching assistant unions, to make sure that we were well-being and say health and safety was at the fore of everything that we were doing. And when I say officers as well, health and safety are part of those discussions. So any decisions that we've made throughout the pandemic, and even now over the Christmas period, we were meeting to discuss this period of time now. As restrictions are lifted nationally, then again, we will work as our task and finish group to provide that cautious approach that we already have adopted over the whole period of the pandemic. As you rightly said, there's been very little of in-school transmission and very little closures of schools. And I think that's down to, and I have to give full credit here to our professionals in the school settings and the governing bodies who have worked tirelessly to ensure that the risk assessments have been robust and that they've put mitigations in place in the schools to ensure that the risks are minimised. So we will continue that cautious approach, and I'd like to give Scrutiny that assurance today that we will work together with our stakeholders to ensure that what we do is right for Powys children and staff.
Thank you, Lynette. Just my final question, and then I will summarise and thank you. This second report came to us today specifically at my request on behalf of the committee, so that the learning was captured and there was a document available as we go into the transition to a new council, so that there was something available for members coming in, almost as a briefing, so that they knew what had gone on for any new members to bring them up to speed. But I'm mindful of my time in emergency planning in the dim and distant past, that there are a lot of contingency plans and contingency documents available to emergency planners around specific repeatable events. And whilst I hope we will be out of the COVID pandemic, I know in my past I've talked about plans for pandemics in respect to flu. So I would ask you if you would consider, when things wind down a little bit and you have more time, consider working with our emergency planning team to turn this lessons learnt document into a working document, so that there is a contingency plan formally in place that takes the lessons learnt from this programme that can be taken off the shelf were we to be unfortunate in 2, 3, 5 years' time to be faced with another COVID or a flu pandemic, so that the lessons we've learnt this time are actually there as an operational document that can be taken off the shelf and reviewed, rather than people who may not be working for this authority or maybe not be working anywhere at this point have actually got a document that they can work with and gain the benefits of what has worked this time. So that will be a recommendation. The report came to us from you, so I'm guessing that it will be a recommendation back to you as officers as part of the minutes of this meeting, rather than something that goes to Cabinet, unless you want to take it to Cabinet in some way. It's a pity that the portfolio holder has had to go away to another meeting, so we couldn't formalise something between us.
Yeah, I think that's a really good suggestion. Obviously, we've got our business continuity plan, so I think as an annex there on that plan, we can make sure that, as you say, we have got a clear way forward. We know that we can quickly move into different aspects of work, as we did with the childcare hubs, as we've done with the check-in, prepare, etc., the well-being, the 3 work streams we set up. That that was a strategy we used. So all of that could be documented. I agree, and I'll take forward that recommendation from you, Chair.
Thanks very much, Lynette. I'm going to draw to close with actually recognition of something that you had said. Throughout this pandemic, I, as Scrutiny Chair, can only commend you for the way that you have engaged both with Scrutiny and directly with myself and the Vice Chairs and group leaders in terms of being open with your plans and open to suggestions as to how they could be modified and improved. I think it has been a very refreshing example of how in an emergency, Scrutiny and opposition can work alongside the Cabinet in the best interests of the citizen. So that's the first positive point I would add. The second one I would add is I have to give an amazing amount of recognition to the ALN team as well, because they were a team that going into the Estin review were one that I think it was quite clear from interactions with Scrutiny that I had very serious concerns about their direction and about their ability to deliver the programme. And it has been quite clear throughout the pandemic that not only were they adapting to the changing circumstances, but as a team, they were growing and developing. And the reports back from Estin around the fact that they are now virtually a beacon for Wales to look to is a really positive move. And I will pay tribute to the team for going back to that darkened room when we were preparing for the Estin first Estin conference, where you brought 4 middle-ranking officers in and let us loose on them to give them quite a hard time. I think it's pertinent to say that most of those now are the people that are delivering forward the ALN transformation, and that kind of baptism of fire from us didn't frighten them off, and we have a very, very good ALN team coming out as a response. And I'm going to take this opportunity, because I'm not sure how many others pertinent opportunities we're going to have, and with Hayley in the room in particular. I know she's looking very embarrassed at this point, but I think it is an area that we have significantly improved upon, and is very much worthy of the affirmation from Scrutiny that their efforts and their activities and their improvement, although they haven't been in front of us for a while, it has not gone unnoticed. And to do it with everything else that's on them is really to be commended. So you stole my thunder slightly, Lynette, but I want to leave it on that point, that well done to all of you in that respect.
Thank you, Chair.
Thanks. At that point, I draw the COVID session to a close. Our final item of business, Wyn, is an update on where we are with the work programme. I know we've got a number of things coming forward to us, so if you'd just like to go through that, and then we will close the formal meeting and move back to the non-live session just for a couple of minutes review of the session.
Well, thanks, Chair. Yes, we've got a very busy period coming up in terms of draft budget next week, alternative budget the week after, assuming that there is one, and say that meeting's only in provisionally dependent on whether the alternative budget actually has an impact on the education service. And then beginning of March, we're looking at the ALN strategy and curriculum for Wales. And there's another item we've changed now to replace Bwcanllaeth, but I can't let me remember what it is off the top of my head.
I think it's the audit report that's been referred to us.
Yes, that's true. Yes, that's quite right. Thanks, Chair. And then we have the pre-election period, then we start again in June.
Thanks very much, Wyn. Councillor Bryn?
Yeah, thanks. Yeah, I just you said the broken things been replaced now. Why was it in there? Why is it not in there? It was scheduled for closure and it's been reprieved. I don't know, for some time. I don't know what's going on with broken fibre.
I think it's a situation that we're not even going out to consultation as yet. So it won't happen this side of the election, as I understand it. So therefore, that's been taken down for the time being.
Bryn, my understanding, unless Lynette corrects me, is that when the business case for the other part of the Llanfathin catchment was withdrawn, all of the proposals within that catchment area were withdrawn because of the knock-on implications. So the plans to go out for consultation for Bro-Cynllaeth were pulled at that point, and I've seen Lynette nodding.
Correct.
And Councillor Lucy wanting to come in.
Yeah, because there was Llangedwin was also part of the scheme, but it's been separated from Bro-Cynllaeth now, isn't it? I don't know. Yeah. Okay.
Councillor Lucy.
Yeah, thanks, Chair. Just to comment, something I've been meaning to pass on to Lynette was talking to local governors, not in the school that I'm a governor of, but they would love to have a bit more information about when the situation might be readdressed, because they feel as though they're kind of in a bit of a vacuum at the moment and are concerned about when they might get further information. So that would be helpful if you could get that information out. Thank you.
Okay, go ahead, please, Lynette.
Yeah, just to taking that on board, Councillor Lucy, I've already met with one chair of governors last Friday, so we'll make sure that we're communicating with those schools now in the next coming weeks.
Okay, thank you for that. Is that okay, Lucy?
Sorry, yes, thank you.
Thanks for that. In which case, unless there are any further comments, I'd like to thank you all for your inputs today. It has been a very detailed session, but it has also been a very important session, and one that will impact on something that will dictate education's direction in one area for the next 10 years. So thank you all very much for the efforts that you put in on this. At that point, Wyn, I'd like to thank everyone who's watched us, and we'll now draw this meeting formally to a close and you can take us offline.